The story begins in a place with old, corroded walls, wooden furniture that is about to break, and insects flying in from outside through the ventilation. But that small insect flying freely was something that caused envy in the boy who lived there. So whenever he saw them, he ended up killing them, killing one with the palm of his hands. Seeing the little bug crushed in the palm of his hand, he decided to try it to see what it tasted like, since he didn't have much experience with life. Upon licking it, he felt a strong, bitter taste. That boy spent his entire life in that place. He had been trapped in that bunker ever since he was born. He turned on the lights to write. He had hoped that someday he would manage to escape that place, and then he could use the self-introduction he was writing now. Usually, this kind of introduction starts with a name, but he had never been called by his name, so he didn't even know what it was. However, he surely must have one. Some name his mother must have given him, even though he had been separated from his mother right after birth. Looking at the picture of his mother holding him in her arms, he knew he had a name. He kept looking at the portrait of his mother smiling with him in her arms. It made him happy, and he said out loud that his mother probably loved him very much. A man overheard and said that she was dead, and repeated that the boy's mother was dead, leaving him in shock. He quickly turned around and asked what the man was talking about. With a smile on his face, he replied that the boy's mother had killed herself after he was born, jumping off a bridge. Those words made the boy furious. That man was not just any man, he was the boy's father. But he was a bastard of a father who had locked him there, so he wouldn't escape under any circumstances. With a long hallway and doors with lock, and all the keys to the lock were in the hands of the old man, who told the boy not to worry because he would never send him outside, and asked his son if he had already told him the reason why his mother chose to die. The boy said nothing, just stared at him. He grabbed one of the cookies on the table, and quickly brought it close to the boy as if to hit him. He said that his mother had been afraid of the world she lived in, of that planet. She knew an apocalypse was coming, he said, breaking the cookie in his hand. The boy just watched with an angry look, and his father went on saying that the reason he didn't send the boy outside was because he loved him. He couldn't watch his own son die. That made the boy even angrier. With a trembling voice, he said his father was lying and asked if she really was just afraid of the apocalypse, and shouted, telling him not to speak like that about his mother, and that he would not believe anything he said because he had locked him there, telling lies about an apocalypse. His father calmly said that he could choose whether to believe it or not. He picked up the self-introduction the boy had been writing, and said that book would never see the light of day, then lit a lighter. The boy grew desperate and begged him to stop doing that, but the man ignored him and set the book on fire. He threw it in the trash while it finished burning completely. Leaning over the trash, the boy said that someone like that man had no right to be called a father. With a slight smile on his face, his father said he shouldn't say something like that because he was doing all this for him, and told him to follow because it was time. The two then went down the hallways, always at the same time every day, the same hallway they always walked through. Inside, there were no sounds of other forms of life. He and his father were the only inhabitants of that vast bunker. With chalk in his hand, the man wrote on the board, always the same routine until today. The same classes and the same training every day. There was only one thing that helped the boy get through that boring daily life. He pulled a book from under his desk. In the brief free time he had in the daily routine, he could tape books from the bunker's library to read. Although there were many books in the library, the ones he liked most were those that described the outside world, and he kept wondering what sunlight described in the books would be like. It was probably much warmer compared to the lights underground. In his dreams, the boy saw himself in a field bathed in sunlight. He wanted to experience a peaceful daily life and wanted to see the beautiful scenery, talk to people, and maybe become friends with someone. But above all that, he needed to do something immediately after escaping while he sat there daydreaming. His father kicked him, knocking him backward. He then grabbed the book he was reading, saying that books were only allowed in his free time. He read that the book was about the surface. He smiled and said it was pathetic, because he'd already told him before that he would never be able to leave this place, and asked if the boy still actually had hope of getting out. He went on to say that when the apocalypse comes, and only ashes remain in the end, the world will be filled with screams and blood. It seemed the boy still hadn't realized that this bunker was the only safe place for him. But the boy listened to that and couldn't stand hearing that same lie again. All that talk about the apocalypse coming or anything like it. For that absurd reason, he had locked him there for his entire life, and continued to torture him with physical and psychological abuse. The boy was determined to escape that prison no matter what. He got up from the floor, because he knew it wasn't time yet, and he had to wait for the right moment, which would be when his father let his guard down, and was defenseless so he could grab the keys. Sometime later, in another room like a gym, the boy was sweating heavily while training intensely, and his father asked if he was tired just from that, saying that this way he wouldn't survive the apocalypse. "You've only done 10 so far," he finished saying. The boy couldn't handle the weight and ended up dropping everything. Lying on the floor, gasping for breath after so much effort, he noticed his father's shadow approaching. When he looked up, he saw his father's hand extended, as if offering to help him up. The boy found that attitude strange and asked why he was helping him. But when his father grabbed the boy's arm, he pulled him quickly. Preparing to strike him, he asked, "Who said I was going to help you?" and then hit him, spinning his body, throwing him toward the gym wall. The boy hit a mirror there, shattering it, and his father said he should never trust anyone who offered him a hand, that he must remain on maximum alert with humans, especially in times of apocalypse. That's why he had trained him and taught him combat techniques, because when he met other humans, he needed to be strong enough to survive even with clean hands. He stood there looking at the youth lying in front of the mirror, called him weak because he fainted from just that one blow, and turned his back, saying they'd stop there for the day. The young man's eyes lit up with the opportunity. His father's back was to him, careless. He quickly got up and grabbed a shard of glass. That was the moment he had been waiting for. When his father completely lowered his guard, he would kill him in his carelessness, then take the key and escape from there, charging toward the man with all his hatred. He thought his plan had worked. He was already very close to carrying it out, but there was a flaw in that plan. The man quickly noticed something was happening. He looked down because something caught his attention. He saw a different light in his shadow, and quickly realized his son was coming at him. He was a man who had never lowered his guard in his life. In the blink of an eye, he turned toward his son. His father's speed startled the boy, who was already face to face with him, but that didn't make the youth give up the attack, and he lunged forward, trying to stab the old man with the glass. But he seemed to be in slow motion compared to his father. He was terrified by all of it. The man dodged the youth's blow with ease, and quickly countered with a kick toward the boy, that landed squarely on his face. Time passed after their duel. The young man woke up startled, and then realized he was lying in his bed. Still shaken by it all, he heard his father say that he had finally woken up, and that it was a good attempt. The youth's attack had been a good one, but as he had already said, if it's not with his bare hands, then all that training means nothing. Therefore, as his penalty for using a weapon, he would have to train twice as much. The man then locked the youth in the room again, and told him to rest for now because tomorrow would be a big day. The lights went out and the man left. The youth knew something his father didn't. When the lights went out and all electricity in that room shut down for a moment, and all the sounds disappeared. At that moment, when he focused his hearing, pressing his head against the wall, fixing his ear to it, he was able to hear things he hadn't heard before, things from very far away, the sound of wheels turning, birds singing, and even the noise of a bustling city. From that, he discovered two truths. When his father said it was time to sleep, it was actually daytime above ground, and the other truth was that the world was peaceful. His father said the end was near, but all of that was a lie to keep him down there. On top of all that, the boy wanted to find his mother, because whenever he asked anything, his father always said she was dead. But the boy knew it was just a lie and believed there was a hidden meaning in what his father said. The boy had great hope that his mother was still alive. Ready to rest, he reflected that one day he would escape from there and find his mother no matter what happened. While the boy was deep in thought, his father kept walking down the hallways, laughing to himself. His phone vibrated with a call. He stopped and pulled the phone from his pocket. Seeing the call left him startled. He answered the call. He asked what that was about, since he had already said not to call unless it was an emergency. While the boy slept peacefully, the one who called his father was saying a lot of things, and the man simply listened to what the person on the other end of the line had to say. He froze at what he heard, and replied in agreement, saying to leave him alive. After the call, he threw his cell phone to the ground, breaking it. What he heard was not something that pleased him. As he dropped to the floor after the call, he cried, trying to control himself. The boy, who had been sleeping, began to hear some laughter, which grew louder and ended up waking him. His father was turned away from him, laughing hard, as if he were out of his mind. The boy found it strange and asked what was going on. When he tried to get up and couldn't, he looked down and saw that he was tied to the chair. He asked what his father was doing and told him to untie him, but his father kept laughing, facing the wall. He realized the man wasn't listening or simply didn't care, so that gave him an opportunity. He began to try to loosen the rope slowly, bit by bit. The rope began to give, and when he was happy that it was working, his father stopped in front of him, looking at him seriously, and told him to stop trying to get free. But the way the man spoke left the boy in shock. The boy swallowed his fear and asked if his father had forgotten that today the training was supposed to be twice as hard. He was told that the plans had changed. They weren't going to do anything today, and not just today, but every day from now on, the boy would not be able to do anything except sit in that chair. The boy desperately asked what he was talking about, since he always said he would train him to survive the apocalypse, and if he kept him tied, he wouldn't be able to. Then the man interrupted, saying that the training ends now. He kept wondering what had suddenly gotten into his father, thinking he wouldn't be able to do anything if he stayed trapped there, and that he wouldn't have the chance to see his mother. So he refused to accept his father's words and kept trying to break free. The man asked what he was trying to do. He didn't answer, just strained to free himself. His father was impressed with the boy's attitude. It seemed like he was admiring him. But then, a sudden shout made the boy very scared. His father then, laughing maniacally, seemed possessed by something, and charged at the boy, slapping him across the face, knocking him to the ground. He went over to where the boy had fallen, lifted him up, and asked if he hadn't told him not to move from that chair. He held back the pain he was feeling, and kept trying to break free from the chair. Once again, his father charged at him, knocking him to the ground. But even on the floor, the boy did not give up on freeing himself, and the cycle continued. Not even the boy knew what had gotten into him at that moment, because he could have just pretended to accept what his father said and tried to find another opportunity. But at that exact moment, he didn't want to lose to his father, even if it cost him his life. His resentment toward his father, the one who had locked him up and made him suffer, was growing stronger and stronger. Between blows and falls, the boy succeeded. He had freed himself from the ropes. He was overwhelmed with emotion when he saw the ropes torn, but he was still in danger, and curious to know what was happening with his father, who had always kept him trapped there. The young man turned with a smile, looking at his father. Once again, the man was getting ready to strike the boy, but the boy saw something that surprised him. Looking at his father, he became thoughtful. He knew without a doubt his father would be angry, but something was different. What he saw in front of him were tears that had always been hidden, that left the boy in shock. Behind the depressing eyes of a sad man, the boy wondered why he had that look now. He took another blow from his father, but his father's expression was different from before. The boy's eyes slowly began to close. His father appeared in his view with a somewhat sad look. And before his eyes closed completely, his father said he hoped he would understand. The boy dreamed of a lesson his father had given him in the past, saying to always keep survival tips in mind. And the most important was rule number 1. Rule number 1 for surviving the apocalypse. It said to never leave the bunker, because there would be no safer place in the world than there. Thousands of defense mechanisms could last for 126 years. With a large supply of food and resources, trying to live outside that place where everything was prepared was like dying by jumping into a bonfire. The end would find you without any warning, so he should never leave the bunker. The boy woke up with that in his head, and when he fully regained consciousness, he noticed that his father had disappeared and left him behind. That had never happened before, and the only times his father disappeared were when he lay down to sleep. He was intrigued by what was happening, because his father had started acting strangely yesterday, so definitely something had happened. From the repeated routine in the bunker to the current situation he couldn't understand. Then he instinctively knew that something huge was about to happen, and following his gut feeling, when he saw the door open, he thought it was a good idea. When he truly realized that the door had opened, he was amazed because it had never happened before. All the doors in the bunker began opening one by one. Everything was free for him to go wherever he wanted. The boy didn't even know how to proceed from there, but he couldn't just stand still. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and he took off running through the corridors. His father could try to stop him now, but he wasn't there anymore. Running as fast as he could in search of the exit, he ended up finding a staircase at the end of the hallway. The staircase was huge. It seemed endless, but he didn't hesitate and began climbing quickly. With each step he climbed, he grew more anxious. Seeing the light coming from the tunnel's exit, he prayed it was sunlight. He reached the bunker's exit and opened the hatch that covered it, and the light bathed his face. He stepped out, setting his feet on the ground. The bright sunlight forced his eyes shut, but he fought to keep them open. He was impressed by everything he saw. He was right in the middle of the city. All those buildings and cars left him amazed. He was in awe at the size of it all. It was much more than he expected after reading about it in books. He was in disbelief over what he had just done. He had finally managed to leave the bunker. A man appeared, catching his attention, and asked what he was doing standing in the middle of the street. The boy was fascinated to see another person besides his father. He shouted out loud that it was a real person, while the man, startled, wondered if the boy had some kind of problem. But the boy quickly realized now was not the time for that. It was still too early to let his guard down because his father would notice he wasn't there and would come after him. And for now, he had to get as far from the bunker as possible. The boy was overjoyed because he was living a dream he'd had his whole life, which was to escape that bunker. And for the first time, he was free. Until some time ago, escaping had been impossible. He could never have imagined the doors would suddenly open. That sparked something in his mind, and he froze, thinking, why had that happened? He wondered if it had been a system malfunction. But he knew his father was meticulous and wouldn't make a mistake like that. And if all of that, opening all the bunker's doors, was his father's idea, he refused to accept that possibility and thought it was impossible. Because it was his father who had established the rule to never leave the bunker. He was the one who had come up with this whole idea. The boy began to notice everything around him. Adults chatting, smiling, and enjoying themselves. Teenagers coming back from school with their friends. Children playing happily. With every scene he saw, he became more surprised. Everyone seemed happy and without a single worry. That calmed the protagonist's thoughts. Seeing happy people cleared his mind. He had his answer. Everything his father had told him was a lie. Because everything was so peaceful. Outside the bunker, everything was so calm. Animals and people living in harmony. just as the boy had hoped. An approaching apocalypse made no sense at all. Everything he had just seen seemed to be taking over his mind. And in the end came his father's words, that the end comes without any warning. Then many birds suddenly began to fly away in panic, and that caught people's attention. A flock of birds flew by quickly. But it wasn't just the birds that caught people's attention. Something was blocking the sun in the sky, completely covering the sun. Everyone was frightened by it, especially the boy who had just come out of the bunker. Something massive in the sky began moving toward the planet. Some things like roots, forming spirals and coming closer and closer to the ground. Everyone was terrified because it was too close, and they wondered what that thing in the sky was. The boy grew more and more desperate. He wondered if the rest of the people couldn't see it. He saw a very bright light in the sky. It was a monster coming toward Earth. That left the boy in shock. And it wasn't just that monster. It was only one among thousands that formed the spirals. Thousands and thousands of monsters rushing toward Earth, each time moving faster, almost touching the ground. The boy remembered his father's words to never leave the bunker. That was the basic rule to improve the chances of survival. However, there was an exception. If the bunker's location was exposed to enemies, or if a dangerous moment arrived, rule number 1 no longer applied. All the monsters entered the bunker, which was open. They seemed to know there was something for them inside. The people around just froze, staring at all of it. A mass of monsters all tangled together, piling on themselves, all over the bunker's entrance, forming what looked like a massive trunk. The people had no reaction to run away and stayed frozen. Then suddenly, one of the monsters lashed onto a person and pulled him toward its body. The man screamed desperately at what was happening. Being dragged into the monster's tentacles, the creature opened a huge mouth. The people could hardly believe what they were seeing. Then the man's head rolled away and stopped in front of 2 young men. Seeing that, they froze for a second, but soon fear took over, and they started screaming and running desperately, causing a stampede effect where everyone began running away from there. People screamed in panic, asking what that thing was. They didn't stop running, trampling over each other. In the middle of all the screaming was a calm young man with headphones on. He seemed unaware of what was happening. Seeing people running made him curious about the reason. But before he could find out what was going on, a huge rock fell on top of him, crushing him. It was one of the monsters that had thrown that massive rock, and it kept throwing more, hurling several rocks toward the fleeing people. Another monster charged at the crowd, leaping over them and landing a short distance ahead. It slashed through some people with a single blow. The monsters began a massacre, killing every person they saw in front of them, in the most brutal way imaginable. And in the middle of all that, the boy remained frozen by what he was witnessing. The people around called for help, but no one could contact the authorities. All of it brought back his father's words, when he once told him that when the apocalypse comes, and only ashes remain in the end, the world will be filled with screams and blood. Only piles of ashes will be left behind. Moments ago, people were happy, enjoying themselves, and now they were all dead, torn apart. The boy no longer knew what to do, seeing those massive monsters taking over the planet. This was the apocalypse his father had always talked about, and it was only just beginning, and the monsters were already destroying everything in sight, descending more and more, taking over everything there was. Lying on the ground, the boy thought his father had been right about the apocalypse. Then that could also mean that his mother must be dead, and he wondered if he was right about that too. People kept desperately running, trying to escape from the monsters. Many couldn't get away and ended up being obliterated by them, and with every moment, more victims were claimed. The boy felt a touch on his hand. Someone grabbed his arm, pulling him. It was his father, dragging him away from the monster. He shouted, asking what he was doing. Amid so many screams of fear, his father told him not to stop running, not even for an instant. The boy obeyed and ran, following his father, but looked back and saw another boy also trying to escape, but not fast enough, and he ended up being devoured by the monsters. That left the boy terrified, but he didn't stop chasing after his father. They turned a corner, but the monsters were there too. His father jumped over a railing and called to him. He quickly jumped as well, following every step his father took. They were going against the flow of people. Where people were fleeing from was exactly where they were headed, and the boy grew more and more scared seeing people being devoured. So many dead in that place. He kept running as fast as he could. People were horrified by what they were witnessing. Another massive wave of monsters came rushing toward them. There were too many, and they were far too fast. People tried to escape, and already up ahead, on the bridge, were the father and son, still running relentlessly. The boy glanced back and was shocked by the number of monsters chasing them, a massive wave of them, with the remains of the people who had died. He told his father the wave was catching up to them, and his father told him to just keep running, because it was the only way to leave the city. That massive bridge connected the city to another place, and the monsters began crossing the bridge too, vaporizing everything in their path. The boy kept running, more desperate by the second. The horde of monsters kept growing, coming straight for the two of them, and the boy told his father that the monsters were following them onto the bridge. Then something froze the boy's body. A monster had managed to grab his leg, squeezing it tightly. He screamed in pain. He needed to get it off him right now. Then his father appeared with a large rock and smashed the tentacle of the creature that was lashed onto his son. The monster screeched in pain and pulled back, falling off the bridge below. The boy's leg was badly injured. It looked as if the monster had burned it. He sat on the ground, his father standing in front of him, both feeling the bridge tremble. The monsters didn't stop crossing the bridge to get to them. All of them seemed thirsty for blood, advancing faster and faster across the bridge. The boy tried to stand so he could keep running, because he couldn't stay there. He needed to run far away from that place. But the more he ran, the more he realized the distance between him and the monsters was closing fast. No matter how much he ran, his leg hurt too much, and he ended up falling. He wouldn't be able to get away from the monsters. He lifted his head, looking at his father, who was standing before him. In the middle of fear and anger, the boy told his father to go on alone because he couldn't run in that state, and that he'd be able to get far away. His father then turned his back to him, and the boy thought his father just needed to run, remembering all the times his father had turned his back on him, since the man always ignored him anyway. In the middle of his sad thoughts, he was surprised to see his father extending his hand to him, asking why he still hadn't gotten up. The boy was shocked by his father's attitude. He shouted, asking why he wasn't running, since he had already told him he couldn't run. His father said he could survive because he had a plan, and the boy was stunned by that, because there was no way he could already have a plan for this. But when he looked at his father's face, for some reason it gave him a lot of confidence. He grabbed his father's hand and stood up, and as soon as he stood, his father pulled him back, telling him to run as fast as he could. The boy then ran one way while his father went the other. He shouted, saying his father hadn't told him his plan. Then he noticed there was something in his hand, and his father told him there was no time for explanations. He just needed to escape using the bridge, and the boy ran with all his speed, groaning in pain but still not stopping. He ran tirelessly across the bridge, trying to reach the end of it as fast as possible. He noticed the shadow of several tentacles above him. He looked back in fear, but they weren't tentacles. It was the bridge collapsing. The bridge was falling apart little by little. The massive bridge fell into the great abyss, along with all the monsters that were on it. The boy stared at the countless monsters falling and the many that remained in the other city. On the other side of the bridge, he was shocked by all of it. In disbelief at everything, he could only think about his father. He wondered what had happened there. Why the bridge collapse, and could it be that? He remembered his father saying he could survive and that he had a plan. He wondered if the plan his father was talking about was this. In disbelief, he asked himself why. Why had his father gone this far, torturing him his whole life? So why now? The boy couldn't understand what was happening or why his father had sacrificed himself for him. He had survived, but why did his father do this? What was the reason for him trying to keep him alive? Everything he had dreamed of when imagining life above ground, the sun bathing his skin and the friends he would make. All of that disappeared in an instant. The peaceful life, the beautiful world above the bunker. All of this filled the boy with more anger. His only goal had just become impossible. So through his tears, the boy said he wanted to ask, why had his father gone so far? Just to save him. What was still in the world that made it necessary for him to keep living. The boy couldn't understand why his father had saved him, only to keep living in that shitty world. He then remembered the handshake with his father, and the paper that had been handed to him. He quickly looked at his hand. He saw that the paper was still there, and what he saw written on it left him stunned. Still sitting at the edge of the collapsed bridge, a monster's arm appeared, gripping the edge. That startled the boy, who quickly became alert. The monster kept climbing onto the remaining part of the bridge, and the boy stood up and tried to run. But his legs still hurt badly, and because of that, he couldn't get far from the creature. The monster finished climbing, and the boy knew he had to act now. The beast lunged at the boy, who threw himself to the side of the bridge, and right after, the monster jumped too. He hit the ground, rolling, and the same happened to the monster. The boy tried to stand up, but he couldn't stay on his feet. His stamina was running out. He knew he wouldn't be able to outrun that monster, so he would probably die right there. But he refused to accept that, because before he thought he had nothing left. And opening the note his father had left again, with tears falling onto it. The note said that his mother was still alive, and the boy wondered why his father had told him that only now. The monster rose to its feet. Struggling, the boy also stood up, his legs wobbling. He decided that he wanted to live longer, and he would not give up. He would do whatever it took to live and find his mother. But just wanting it wasn't enough, because the monster didn't care about what he wanted, and the boy trembled with fear, thinking he wouldn't be able to escape it. He remembered his father's teachings, that when the apocalypse came, humans were not skilled enough to survive. Not unless they had the power or wisdom to live independently. In the middle of all those thoughts, he was desperate, watching the monster coming toward him. His father's words came back to his mind, that even if humans managed to survive in the end, they wouldn't be able to withstand the dangers that repeated with every passing day. Every second, the monster came closer to him. He thought about the question he once asked his father. If that happened, how would he survive? If what he said was true, that meant he could do nothing, and should just accept his death, he questioned. The monster lunged at him, ready to punch the boy in the face, and at that moment, he felt as if his father was speaking to him, asking if he had forgotten what he'd been taught. Then he remembered all the combat training he'd had with his father. That made something click in the boy's mind, and he dodged the monster's attack, completely moving out of the beast's path. That went straight past him. Amid the dust that rose, the boy stood there panting. He and the monster stared at each other for a brief moment, and the beast roared in anger, filling the boy with fear. But in his mind came his father's voice, telling him he was different from other humans, and that the biggest difference between him and the rest of the people was that he knew how to survive. So the boy took a deep breath and held back his tears, calming his body and mind, and prepared to fight the monster. The monster charged for another attack, but the boy was confident because of everything he had learned so far, his training and all his experience, and the survival knowledge he had been taught. He was going to use all of that, and do everything he could to survive whatever was coming, in that apocalypse that was just beginning. In that city, nothing was left but ruins and countless bodies scattered on the ground. Some of the few survivors were devastated by what had happened. A woman said that 4 days had already passed and asked if the police shouldn't be doing something by now, and that they were lucky to be hiding there, but they would have to go look for food, so they might have to leave. She talked and talked, but the man beside her said nothing, and the woman complained that he never wanted to say anything. She went on, saying that if they waited, then someone called, but before she could finish her sentence, someone interrupted her. She turned to the person who told her to just accept it, because she was starting to make everyone uncomfortable. She questioned why, since she wasn't even speaking loudly, and the man realized she hadn't understood. He said that wasn't exactly what he meant, while the girl remained confused, sitting next to someone who had already died. The man turned his back on her, telling her to just drop it, and walked away, saying he was already losing his sanity. A girl then called out to the man. He asked if she had checked the area, and she replied that yes, but they hadn't found food anywhere. The man understood but said they needed to find food if they wanted to stay there. The girl said there was still one place she hadn't checked, pointing in a direction she said she still hadn't searched there, and that she would go take a look, asking the man not to give up. The man thanked the young girl, saying everyone seemed exhausted from defending themselves against the monsters, so no one was willing to help, and she was the only one willing to help, finishing by telling her she was a great kid. Embarrassed, she said not really because she wasn't a good student. Smiling, the man told her to keep her hopes up and try to get everyone out of there safely. The girl was left without words to respond to him. She then went on with her search for food. She came across two people who were talking, and asked if they had searched for food in that area. The two looked at each other. The woman rummaged through some things behind her, showing a sandwich she said she had found earlier today. The girl was happy with the news, but the woman tore the plastic bag open. The girl didn't know what to say to her. She tried to tell them to wait a moment. Then the girl shouted, asking what they were doing, since they had been told to share everything they found with the others. And the woman said only boring people made that decision, and that they hadn't said they were going to do that. The little girl said that just yesterday, the two of them had eaten from the shared food. The man acted clueless and said he didn't remember that. She said then she was going to report them. The man stood up and asked her why she didn't go ahead and try, and if she thought they would just sit there and watch her tell the others. Very bravely, the girl said it was useless, because he probably wouldn't be able to catch her anyway, since she was very good at running. That made the man angry, and he got ready to grab her. Then a loud scream echoed through the place. The two looked toward where the sound came from, panicked. He asked the woman if that had been a scream, and she confirmed it. She said it must have come from far away, so they were probably fine there. Sweating nervously, he said he'd been startled for nothing. Then he was shocked when he looked back at the girl, who was squatting down, covering her ears, trembling badly after that scream. Laughing at her, the man asked if she wasn't the one who had been confident a minute ago, and said she was nothing but a little coward, and he wanted to see her run with those trembling legs. The little girl saw a snack lying on the ground. She picked it up and went back to where everyone was. She reached the man she had spoken to earlier. He asked if she had checked the area that was left. She briefly replied that she had. The man asked if she had found anything. With the snack hidden in her hand inside her pocket, she thought for a moment. Her stomach was growling with hunger. She answered that she hadn't found anything over there. The man said that was already expected, but it was fine because the most important thing was that they were alive and later they could look for more food. Just as he finished speaking, a monster burst into the place, raising a huge cloud of smoke. As it passed, the girl who had fallen to the ground, trembling with fear. When she looked up, she saw the monster going after the man she had spoken to before. Crawling, he looked at the girl and reached out his arm and asked her for help in a trembling voice. The girl turned her back and ran, apologizing. The man shouted, asking why she wasn't helping him. Without stopping, the girl said she had warned before that she wasn't a good person, and kept running, trying to find the exit. The two others who were inside were also running, trying to get out. Already on the street, they saw another monster and the girl a little ahead of them. The woman said it was fine, because if the little girl got caught, they could use her as bait and run the other way. And she thought the little girl was an idiot for running straight toward the monster. And the huge monster noticed the girl's presence, who didn't hesitate for a second to run toward it. The monster shot several arms toward the girl, who kept running quickly, and began dodging all the attacks, jumping and rolling on the ground, avoiding everything with great agility. The other two were shocked to see that scene, and the girl managed to pass the monster, and kept running even farther away. The man remembered the girl saying she was very good at running. He was in disbelief to find out she had been telling the truth. The two were then caught by the monster that had been chasing them. A little farther away, the girl leaned against a wall, panting and tired after so much running. She wondered if those monsters had gone away now. She noticed something next to her. The young protagonist sitting unconscious beside her. She was startled by him and pushed him. He fell to the ground, still out cold, and the girl kept looking at him. She wondered if he was alive or dead. She heard something approaching. It was another monster. She pressed herself against the wall in fear, wondering if the monster had heard her. The creature slowly moved closer, and she grew more and more scared, while the young man lay exposed on the ground before the monster. But quickly, the girl grabbed him by the collar and pulled him, hiding him from the creature. Some time later, the girl thought that this time the monsters had gone, and breathed a sigh of relief after all that tension. Lowering her head, grateful to be alive, she met the gaze of the boy lying in her lap. The two were startled by that, and the boy quickly jumped away from her, asking who she was and what she had been trying to do to him. The girl didn't understand any of what had happened, and in the boy's mind came only his father's words, to never forget, to keep humans far away. The girl asked what he meant and said she had only pulled him so the monster wouldn't see him. But the boy wasn't even paying attention, only remembering his father saying not to trust humans because they would want to kill him. And if his father was right, he wouldn't survive for long if he got close to humans. Since they were sly and devious creatures, he decided to ask how he should believe the girl, but then collapsed to the ground with his stomach growling. He was starving. The last time he had eaten was 5 days ago in the bunker, and now he had reached his limit, even taking long pauses to preserve his energy, and right now, when he was talking to a human, he became weakened. The girl quickly said she had nothing to eat. He didn't understand, and asked what she was talking about since he hadn't asked anything. Trying to cover it up, she said he looked hungry, so before he even asked, she was already saying she had nothing, and to her misfortune, her snack fell from her pocket. She broke into a cold sweat at all that, and the boy saw it lying on the ground. He asked what that was. The girl didn't know what to answer. He wondered what that thing she had dropped was. He didn't know what it was, but he felt hungrier every time he looked at it. He decided to ask if that was food. Sweating and frozen, she said no. He kind of accepted that he was wrong, and she went on saying that it wasn't food in any way. She was surprised at how much of an idiot he was for not being able to recognize what food was, and he was deep in thought about it. Then he shouted that it was a lie and asked if she thought he would believe a human. He went on saying she was wrong to think he would believe her, since everything a human says is a lie. She grew more and more surprised at just how much of an idiot he was. The boy was now certain, judging by her reaction, that meant it was food. He needed that food, and if she didn't cooperate, he would have no choice but to take it by force. But before he could do anything, she offered him half of the sandwich, saying that he really did look hungry, so she would give that to him. He wondered why she was sharing food, and if she didn't know she would be at a disadvantage without eating. The girl said that now he owed her 4 reas. He nodded and understood her reasoning, and that humans really were cunning creatures. He finished eating and walked off aimlessly, and the girl asked where he was going. He replied that now that he had eaten, he was going to walk, and she asked where in the world he thought he was going in that situation. He said that this was his neighborhood, so he knew the place very well and was sure there was nowhere else to go. He stopped out of nowhere, and she bumped into him. She complained at him for stopping suddenly, and he asked if she knew that place well. She said yes, because she grew up in that neighborhood. The boy asked if she knew where the subway was. They set off toward the subway, passing through several places, hiding from the monsters. And she wondered how she had ended up becoming the guide of that idiot. And if she had known, she wouldn't have shared her bread with him. Something then caught her attention. She asked why he wanted so badly to go to the subway, and he replied that it was safe there. She asked what he was talking about. He went on saying that there it was full of resources they needed to survive, and it was the route that would take them far from the monsters. And most importantly, in the subway, it was harder for monsters to detect humans. She found him stranger and stranger, because he spoke as if he knew something, especially when he couldn't even recognize bread. She told him they had arrived at their destination. Seeing everything in ruins, she said she was sure it was somewhere around there. The boy asked if she was sure this was the place, because usually the subway was underground, and finished by saying he knew she would try to trick him. Already frustrated, she said obviously the subway wasn't there and that she was trying to find the entrance. She told him to wait there because she was sure the entrance was nearby. An older man appeared near her, asking for silence, and went on whispering that he had sensed something but didn't expect to find real people talking there. The boy asked who he was. The man said the boy spoke aggressively and told him to leave introductions for later. He told them to follow him, and the girl asked where they were going, and the man asked if that wasn't what they were looking for. They followed the man, going down a staircase. The man said it was right there. The boy was impressed by what he saw, that many people shocked him. There were a lot of people in that place. Everyone had the same idea of hiding there, and the man said he couldn't forget that moment when the monsters appeared without any warning. He knew he could run there because the monsters were everywhere, but fortunately he had found a place to hide, and the fact that he had found that place could only have been luck. Sometimes he went to the surface in search of medicine, but had found nothing except the two of them, and the boy kept watching all the people who were there, thinking to himself that at first he had been planning a base at the subway station, but there were more humans than he expected, and he could see every kind of human in that place, helpless humans trapped in despair. The man was terrified of dying, thinking the monsters would find him there, and the boy kept discovering more types of humans, like those who showed themselves to be wicked. Toward the other defenseless humans, he kept following the man who was guiding them, and he saw a strange human he couldn't read. The more humans there are, the greater the risk factor they pose. But among all of them, there is no one who could put the protagonist in any real danger. He can instinctively sense who is dangerous, just like those monsters on the surface, and also his father. But here there was no one who gave off a dangerous feeling among them, perhaps because he was here now, since none of them would be able to harm him, even if they were enemies. The man leaned against the wall and asked if they wanted to introduce themselves now, quickly saying his name was Hwang Byum, and as they could see, he was a doctor who had been looking for medicine on the surface and ended up finding the two of them. But he hadn't managed to get much in terms of medication. The boy froze at the introduction, because he didn't know what to say when it was his turn. The girl quickly said she would go first and told him her name was Haru. The man complimented her name and said that judging by her clothes, she was an elementary school student. She confirmed and asked if he knew her school. He replied that yes, because the hospital where he worked was on the other side of the school near the mall. And the girl became thoughtful, as she hadn't known there was a hospital nearby. He then looked at the boy, observing his clothes, all wrinkled and very dirty, and said he had a rather silly question, since it seemed the boy had been through a lot. He asked what the boy's name was. The boy then hesitated before answering, and said he didn't have a name. The old man was surprised at that. He went on, saying he had never had a name. The man thought he just didn't want to say it and told him to give it next time. A man arrived, calling for the doctor, saying things were getting worse. They went to a room where a man was sitting injured on the floor, who looked a little relieved to see the doctor there. The man's condition was getting worse and worse. He had stopped the bleeding temporarily the last time, but it now seemed to be getting much worse, much faster than the doctor expected. So he told the man that if he didn't undergo treatment now, he would be in danger of an infection. He then opened his coat, which had all kinds of necessary materials, and said they had to do it now, and went to treat the man's wounds. The boy grew thoughtful, as he had once read about doctors in a book without his father knowing. It was a job that existed to treat humans for a price. In the current situation, with the apocalypse having happened, what was he receiving as payment to treat humans? He asked the doctor. Everyone looked at the boy, and the doctor asked if the boy thought he was being paid to do something here. He said the doctor's job was to treat whoever was injured. He continued preparing the patient for surgery, telling him not to worry, because he had few failures in surgeries. The man hugged the doctor, thanking him for what he was doing for him. The boy didn't understand why the doctor was helping others, without even receiving anything in return, and wondered if humans were idiots, or if they really did things like this for others. The doctor told his patient to take it easy, because his bleeding could get worse, and the man stayed leaning against the doctor's chest, thanking him. He then read the identification badge, which said veterinarian. The man froze upon reading that, and while the doctor was saying he would start and that it might hurt a little, he tried to pull away and asked the doctor to wait and not do anything. Hwang Byum said he couldn't wait, because something could happen if he moved during the surgery, and the patient shouted in desperation, saying he was a veterinarian and questioning whether the man could really perform surgery. Smiling, he replied that he could, because humans are technically animals. The man grew even more desperate and begged to be let out of there. The doctor then became concerned and tried to find a way to anesthetize the patient. The other person there said they had no choice and would have to do it. The doctor found a brick on the ground, apologized to the man, and struck him on the head with the brick. The boy was speechless at what had just happened, only thinking that humans were truly dangerous. A few minutes later, the boy finally found a quiet place where he could rest. He knew he had done the right thing, since there was no need to watch that mess. Sitting on the floor, trying to rest, he wondered what he should do now. The only thing he had left was the photo his father had given him, the photo taken during his childhood, with writing on the back saying his mother was alive. He no longer had any hope of finding her, as he had no leads left. But every time he looked at that photo, he felt a sense of discomfort. That was because, in the background of the photo, there were unnatural flowers that looked alien. Even back when he was still in the bunker, he had always thought it was strange, and had even tried searching in some books, but never succeeded. If that flower only grew in specific places or environments, then he might be able to discover the location where the photo was taken. And to find that out, he first needed to find someone who could identify that flower. That photo was the only clue he had, so he had to be careful not to lose it, and he would have to ask everyone if they recognized the flower. And as usual, an insect flew by. He killed the little bug and licked it, complaining about the bitter taste. Somewhere else, several people were gathered, and a woman called her boss, saying she had gathered everyone. Then the boss asked if they could start. He told her to take them all there, and if they refuse, then use whatever method she wanted, he concluded. Meanwhile, the people were asking why they had been gathered there. A young man asked why the man was making everyone follow him without any explanation. The man ignored him, but the boy didn't give up and kept shouting, asking if he was listening. He looked back, staring straight at the guy, who trembled in fear from just a glance. That man could see into the deepest parts of people's minds. He could see what thoughts were hidden inside, through their eyes, and that boy was filled with fear, like a baby without parents. He hid his fear by acting that way outwardly, and the boy shouted for him not to come any closer. But in front of that man, your true self was always revealed. He punched the boy, sending him flying into the crowd. Everyone was shocked by it. The man approached the guy again. Smiling, he grabbed him by the shirt, lifting him up, and said that was exactly what he wanted to see, told him to show him more, his true self, deep in his soul. The boy on the ground begged for mercy. The man's subordinate arrived and said it seemed some people weren't there, and the boss asked what she meant. She replied that an old person, a boy, a girl, and another injured person were missing. Wiping his hands, he said he had told her to gather everyone and asked what had happened for her not to do it. She answered that the zone had been assigned to that thug, but he never listened to anything and suddenly disappeared. The boss understood and said they would never be able to keep that guy under control, and said he would handle it himself. He wanted to see their faces when he found them, and told her to tie that trash up and throw him out. The boy begged everyone for mercy, saying he would do whatever they ordered. Meanwhile, the boss just turned his back and went after the ones still missing. In a room a bit farther away from there, the protagonist was just waking up from his nap. He hadn't been able to rest well in the past few days because he had to stay on guard against the monsters. When he lifted his head and opened his eyes wide, he was surprised. He was in a place that looked like a tunnel. He pressed his foot against the ground, but couldn't get a sense of it. He wondered if that place was made of marshmallow or what. Drops of sweat ran down his face and fell to the ground. Then he thought that maybe somehow he had been swallowed. The tunnel's walls began wrapping around his body, grabbing him tighter and tighter. He tried to run but couldn't. Then it surrounded his entire body, and he woke up, startled and sweating. It had only been a dream, but it felt very real. Upon waking, he wondered who those people in front of him were, and he asked who they were. The boss said he had 2 minutes to get to the center of the station, and if he didn't go within that time, he would be expelled from that place. One of the man's subordinates said he'd better go now, and if he didn't run, it could be very risky for him. The boy stood up calmly. The boss was disappointed, because he had expected that whoever had skipped the meeting would be someone strong. Then the boy asked if he was going to expel him. That surprised the man, and the boy seemed completely calm about it, as if he didn't care at all. And when the boss looked at him, he saw many fighting spirits surrounding the boy. Then the boy asked how they planned to expel him. The subordinate said that brat was crazy, but the boss seemed to have really liked what he saw in the boy, and told him to look at him, to see his true form, behind his eyes, and what he saw left him stunned. The subordinate didn't understand anything that was going on and said the kid should have left when they gave him time. He questioned the time he was given and said that just 2 seconds was enough to take them down. The subordinate started laughing and said now he understood why the boss had said that boy was so funny. He pulled out a knife and asked what his last words were. The boss put his hand on his shoulder. The protagonist grew desperate when he put his hands in his pockets and couldn't find the photo of his family. Then the man asked if he was looking for that and showed the photo, and said he didn't expect to find anything worthwhile after looking at him, and all he found was that photo. The boy said that if there was a scratch on that photo, he would kill him instantly. His posture already left the man uneasy. The boss then took the photo from the subordinate's hand and said that if the boy came any closer, he would tear the photo, and the subordinate landed a few blows on him. He only defended himself while the man hit him, saying that photo must be very important to him. The boy was furious at himself for having been careless and losing the photo while sleeping, because he knew humans were more dangerous than monsters. The subordinate asked the boss what they were going to do with the brat, and said they should definitely throw him out. He was told no, and the guy didn't understand. When the man looked into his eyes just now, he was different from the rest. Inside his soul, it was so deep he couldn't see anything. And he told his subordinate that they would keep an eye on the boy and take that photo to ensure supervision, and told him not to forget that when watching the boy, he must not let go of the photo for anything. The man questioned what the boss meant, but he only replied that it was an order, and the man obeyed the order, but kept thinking that when the boy was about to attack them, he felt a little afraid. Well, in any case, that didn't matter. As long as he had that photo, the boy wouldn't move a muscle. Then the girl who had been walking with the protagonist earlier showed up. She asked those men what they were doing there. The boss then said he had spared her the trouble of going to look for her. Sweating nervously, she asked if he had been looking for her, and the boss said there would be a meeting at the center of the station. Turning his back to them, the subordinate told the boy he hoped to see him again and would keep the photo safe. The girl was shocked by all that and saw the boy lying on the ground. She walked up to him, extending her hand and asking if he was okay. He slapped her hand away from him. That made her furious as she asked what she had done, saying she had only been helping him up. He replied that he didn't need help and told her to move human. She said her name wasn't human but Haru, and that he should get it right next time. He stood up, walking past her, and asked why he should remember something like that. There was a tense atmosphere between the two. The doctor asked if something had happened between them, and the girl said no. She had just been stupid enough to try having a conversation with someone who didn't know how to communicate. And he thought about why he would hold a human's hand in the first place, always remembering his father's words that if someone reached out a hand to him, he shouldn't trust them. He considered humans his enemies. He saw the subordinate who had his photo, and it would even be easy to take it back by force, because even if he tore the photo, he could just piece it back together. But still, he didn't want to damage the photo. It was the only item he had brought out of the bunker. There was no need for it to be torn. He would just wait for the moment the man let his guard down. The boss then announced the start of the meeting. He immediately began by saying that people had two options: follow him or not follow him. If they decided to follow him, they would have no reason to worry about being expelled from here. Like that guy over there, and he pointed to the side. It was the first young man who had argued with him, and he said that guy had tried to cause chaos in the subway, which was the only shelter around, so he had decided to throw him out. Then, if they choose to stay on this side, at best he won't treat people like that guy who tries to break orders. He won't force anyone to follow him, but if you choose this, know this, his word is absolute. The people stayed thoughtful for a while, but little by little they began moving over to the man's side. The doctor saw his two assistants going over to the man's group as well. He knew that those who are stronger dominate those who are weaker. In a world where the law is obsolete, it's not so strange that things turned out this way. You won't explicitly tell people to follow you, but you'll still manipulate them. Choose the logical side if you want to live long. Then smiling, the doctor thought of something. If you've lived a long life, being unpredictable once in a while isn't so bad. And if he followed that path, he wouldn't be able to help when a patient truly needed it. So he would stay on this side, even if he ended up being alone there. Then he was surprised to see the girl beside him. He asked if she wasn't going to join them, and she quickly replied that she wasn't. He tried to convince her to go to their side because she'd be much better off there. With a slight smile on her face, she said she wasn't the only one with that idea there. Then the doctor turned to where she pointed and saw some people still on this side. One of the young women grew desperate about the decision she had just made. She frantically said she hadn't planned to be there and asked if the others understood that they were trapped there. The guys would be watching them, and their fate would be to wait to be captured and tortured. Someone tried to calm her, saying it wouldn't be that bad. She then gave a relieved smile, and the woman went on, saying it wouldn't be as bad as torture, because they could also starve them to death or throw them all out into the street. The girl only became more desperate, saying she knew they'd end up trapped there. A child bumped into the doctor. The man apologized to the doctor and told the child she couldn't run around there like that. But the doctor didn't seem to mind, saying she was at the age to run and telling the child to listen to her father's advice. The child mumbled something, and the man said he couldn't hear her. She shouted that he wasn't her father, and that her father was somewhere looking for her along with her mother. The man explained to the doctor that he had found the child while fleeing, and she seemed to be separated from her parents. So until he found her parents, he would take care of her. Two men were standing guard at the door leading to the other side, and a boy was approaching to pass through, but the men stopped him, saying he couldn't go beyond that point. The boss had said so, and anyone leaving that room would be severely punished, so he shouldn't think he was an exception just for being young. But he didn't care about what the two were saying. He only wanted to know where that guy was. Sometime later, food began being distributed, and they would be inspected afterwards so no one could take more than the others. The girl asked why they were receiving so little food, and the man said those were the boss's rules, and since they were trapped in that room doing nothing, they didn't need much food. The smell of food spread through the station, reaching the man they called a bandit, who was lying down. He got up quickly after smelling it, wondering if it was time already. The man helping distribute the food said it was almost gone and asked if the other knew who that person was, and was asked who he was talking about. He replied that it was the only one called Chef, a left-handed man. The other man helping to serve said that guy seemed dangerous. He said his nickname was Chicken Comb, and he didn't listen to the boss and wandered around alone. But he thought there was only one reason he was called that. He killed people mercilessly, with a smile, or so they said. Either way, he was very vicious. The boy grew very afraid hearing that. So you couldn't bother him? Not even by accident, the man said. And if you ever ran into him the wrong way, it was safe to say it would be better to be eaten by a monster. After the little girl bumped into him, he smiled and said it was dangerous to run around like that. And now her clothes were like that. He told the little one to follow him. The two men were stunned when they saw the scene. In disbelief that the next victim would be a defenseless little girl, they asked each other why he was walking in their direction. The man then called over the one who was serving food, and told him to give the child a meal. He replied it was only one meal per person, and the man said to give her his. So the child was given another meal. He wondered why he was giving his portion to a little girl. Then he thought this was that so-called food torture, to bother a child while giving away one's own meal, like a lingering habit. Then quickly, the man who was looking after the child came over and told her to stay behind him, and asked what exactly that child had done. Then the man asked if there was any problem with his actions. The man grew uneasy with that kind of person, and moved the child away from him. At the exit door, there were more people than before, and one of the women talking to the girl commented on it. The boy wondered why he couldn't have just met the guy. He noticed someone looking at him. It was the girl staring at him. He remembered the slap on his hand and turned his face away, and the woman beside her noticed that tense atmosphere. Then when the lights went out, everyone lay down to sleep. The woman noticed that the boy stayed sitting in the same place as before. She went over to talk to him. When she tried to poke him to wake him up, he grabbed her arm with considerable force, and she was surprised he was awake. He asked what she was doing and said he knew her plan was to attack him while he was sleeping. She wondered why that child was so strong and told him she just wanted to talk. He questioned why she wanted to do that, and she asked what was wrong with it, saying he acted as if he had never had a conversation before. He didn't say anything, just stared at her. Angrily, he asked what that had to do with her and why it mattered whether he had spoken before or not. The woman didn't know what to say. He let go of her arm and told her to get straight to the point. The woman asked why he was always away from other people, and if he was a shy person. He replied that what she was saying made no sense, and that he had zero reason to stay near the enemy. She asked who the enemy was. He replied that all humans were enemies and asked if there was any reason for him to be close to someone who could attack him. And the woman said she had no plans to hurt him. He said he didn't believe her because she could simply be lying. The woman said she didn't mind him being cautious with her, but asked him to make peace with the girl named Haru. He said he had never fought with her before. With a smile on her face, she asked if he could get along with her then. But he replied that this was another problem, because she was still human, and to him, that girl was no different from the humans outside that room. She then told him that the child might think others couldn't hear her, but she cried every night while holding her breath. There was probably something dark she couldn't say, and that was the same for everyone in that room. And if he was the same age as her, he could relate to her better. The boy said that being sad was something only weak humans did, and if you had time for that, it would be better to figure out another plan to survive. The woman asked if he had never been sad after losing someone important. He then remembered his father sacrificing himself for him, and replied that he hadn't and that it wouldn't be the case in the future, because he didn't have anyone important to him. The woman said that not feeling sad because you don't have a special person must be something so lonely, but she told him not to worry, because if he died, she would be sad for him. He didn't know how to respond to that, and said that was just a way to make someone feel bad, and that he would never die, and wouldn't care if she died. She gave a small smile and said he was very cold. Everyone else kept sleeping. She stood up and said she wouldn't bother him anymore, wished him sweet dreams. He just watched her walk away, and thought she was a very strange human. The crazy girl didn't seem to be doing too well. The protagonist was deep in thought because it had already been 4 long days since he'd been there. At first he had only gone there simply to find a quiet place to rest. Someone then mysteriously entered the room where he was. It was the human who kept him there until now because of his dirty photo. And until now, he hadn't been able to do anything useful to find his missing mother. The brutish men beat him once again, and after a few blows, the boy asked if this was really fun for him. He replied that it wasn't, because they didn't want to do this either. This was the painful punishment for leaving the room like he had last time. The boy then calmly questioned him. Why didn't he punish him alone? And told him to take good care of the photo in the best way possible. That frightened the man a lot, because that brat had no fear of him, and he was only staring intently at the photo as if he were uninterested. He grew very angry, wondering if that kid was really looking down on him. He told him that saying those things meant he hadn't been punished enough. The boy remembered that his father once said humans are inherently weak, and now he finally understood what he meant. Returning to where the others were, the girl who always talked to him spotted him coming back after so long, and the boy concluded in his thoughts that there's not just one type of human. The doctor then said that fortunately, he didn't seem to be hurt, but they should at least do a quick checkup. But the boy quickly replied that he was fine, and sat down again in the same dirty spot as before. Then he was finally offered his delicious lunch, and the smiling young woman said she didn't know when he'd be back, so she saved it for him. He didn't know exactly what to say and even tried to say thank you. The word didn't come out, so he just kept looking at it. Amid her coughing, she asked what he was about to say, and he replied it was nothing. The woman kept coughing several times in a row, and the boy suddenly had a thought. He remembered what she had said before, that she had no plans to hurt him, and if what she said wasn't a lie, then if he actually died, she would feel sad for him. So maybe he could trust her a little. Then her food suddenly fell to the dirty floor, and right after, so did she. Collapsed there on the ground, unconscious. The doctor quickly noticed and asked if she was really okay, running to help her. He said her terrible symptoms didn't look good and she needed medicine. But the serious problem was that he would have to go to the surface because they had no medicine available there. With great difficulty, the woman said she was fine and there was no reason for him to go to the surface for her. He told her not to try to speak and said that if she didn't take the medicine soon, her condition would only get worse. The boy heard all that and then asked, if they didn't get the medicine, how would she actually get better? While the doctor was calmly trying to explain to him, the boss's subordinate entered with 2 other men, saying the boss was calling for the doctor. The doctor and the boy looked at each other, and he placed the photo in front of himself, wondering why the boss always told him to keep the photo in front of the boy, when he could easily handle him without that old photo. He then told the doctor that there were other injured people who urgently needed treatment, and the doctor replied that he couldn't do that right now. That really surprised the man, who asked if he was disobeying the boss's orders right now. A bit afraid, he said it wasn't that, but he would treat the other patients after treating that injured patient, because that patient urgently needed immediate treatment. The young woman stood up and said that if he just told her where the medicine was, she could go to the surface and find it. He then asked what she was really talking about, since she wouldn't be able to survive on the surface in that state. And the man said that if it was just that, then she should have said so earlier. Stabbing her, he said that he could have helped her if that were the case. Everyone was extremely shocked by that horrible scene, especially our protagonist, and the girl fell to the ground after that blow. The doctor couldn't believe what he was seeing, lying there on the floor, bleeding nonstop. The blood ran down to the boy's bare feet, and for the first time, he seemed truly frightened by all of it. He could feel it then, her life slowly slipping away. She was slowly fading away into the dark, and more blood kept spreading around her. He wondered why exactly humans die in such an absurdly easy way. Then he felt a gentle touch on his leg. It was the woman, asking why he looked so serious. He froze, not knowing exactly what to do or say. Smiling and speaking with difficulty, she said she was sure he would care, and her hand fell to the cold floor. Everyone was shocked because the young woman's life had finally come to an end. Meanwhile, the man, without a shred of resentment, only complained that his hands were very dirty. The doctor, visibly nervous, asked how his expression hadn't changed once after killing someone like that. And he also said that the monsters weren't just roaming the surface. Smiling slightly, the man said he was being too harsh, because this wasn't any different from saving the doctor from death. If things had just stayed the way they were, he would have gone to the surface, and the man couldn't afford to lose the doctor over wanting to save someone who was already going to die. And he calmly asked if he shouldn't be grateful for being saved. Dying like this was much more peaceful than being eaten by monsters. He then looked at the boy standing before the body, thinking that finally he was truly feeling afraid. He had clearly acted like he was so tough before, and the boy stared straight at him with growing hatred. The man, smiling maliciously and holding the blood-covered knife, noticed something and asked if he didn't have the photo. It was immediately answered that he must have dropped it when he grabbed the knife earlier, and the boy calmly began preparing himself. Smiling, the man directly asked what he was going to do about it. He was already in position to attack. The man kept provoking and questioning him, but the boy didn't care about him and stayed focused. He was absolutely ready to strike him directly. Mocking, the man asked again if he was going to attack or something like that. He still thought it would be easy to fight the boy, and the boy finally rushed at him quickly, landing a vicious punch to the man's face. It was all so extremely fast that the other two with him didn't even notice. The man's body simply flew far away, and the boy immediately dashed after him to land another strong and unexpected blow, throwing the man even farther away, spinning at an insanely fast and impressive speed. With each step the boy took, deep marks were left in the ground where he had stepped. He then gave another powerful, forceful push. matching the man's absurd speed through the air and positioning himself just above him. And when the man slammed violently into the wall, the boy was already grabbing him by the clothes. With his other hand, he held the man's knife, using it to attack him with rage and without mercy. Everyone was truly frightened by his monstrous speed and strength. He then calmly placed the knife to the man's neck, making a light but deep and fatal cut. The man was already practically dead or completely unconscious after the first 2 blows. All of that only filled the boy with even greater rising anger, because that guy was extremely weak and insignificant. When the boy attacked him, he couldn't even react in the slightest. He didn't have the slightest ability to realize he was about to take such a violent punch. The boy grew even more furious as he looked at him, because if he had known that guy was so absurdly weak, he would have taken a picture of him first, and if he had done that before, then none of this would have happened now. With the knife still pointed at the man's neck, consumed by deadly hatred, his father's face unexpectedly came to mind, telling him to kill that human trash. The hatred only grew stronger, taking over the boy's entire body. In his mind, his father's words told him never to have mercy on enemies and always make sure to finish them. Then the boy was absolutely certain he should kill that man immediately. When he was about to do it, someone shouted desperately, telling him to stop right now. The boy calmly looked back to see who it was, and it was the doctor, clearly saying that if he killed the man, he couldn't undo it afterward. The boy then asked what exactly he couldn't undo. He directly asked if the doctor was worried about that human now, and the man replied that he wasn't the least bit worried about that miserable guy. He said he was only talking about his heart. The boy truly didn't understand anything about what he was trying to say, and the doctor once again asked him to think carefully about it. He directly asked if he really wanted to go as far as killing the man. He then looked intently at the man and at his own reflection in the blood-stained knife. He recalled another intense conversation he'd had with his father, in which he asked if there was any specific reason to kill humans, because if he beat them to the brink of death, they would eventually stop attacking him. And his father replied that he wouldn't be able to stay alive with such a weak mindset. His father also asked if he had some absurd fear of killing humans, and the boy replied directly, telling him not to talk such useless nonsense, because he would never become like him in any way. If the apocalypse really came like he said, the boy promised he would survive in his own way. He wouldn't become like him and go around killing everyone just because he didn't like them. The horrible scene of the man stabbing the woman's stomach vividly returned to his mind. He then dropped the knife on the floor and felt immediate relief. The doctor was very happy because he had made the right decision and smiled with satisfaction. But the boy said it wasn't because of what he had said, but for another unknown reason. He just felt that if he did it, he would become like that guy, and that deeply bothered him. However, in his mind, he thought there was no specific reason to kill that man, and that confused him. He shouldn't care whether the woman lived or died, because it made no difference to him. Even if she lived, it wouldn't help him in any way to find his mother, and that was what truly mattered. So it didn't matter to him, and he decided to let it go. While reflecting on this, a man came up behind him to attack with a heavy stick, and he didn't notice. He thought it would be the perfect moment because the boy wasn't holding the knife and was completely distracted. He moved in to strike him with all his strength. The boy, who was holding the unconscious man's body, instinctively used that body to defend himself. Then he dropped the body to the ground and went for the man who had tried to attack him with great determination. He punched him hard, making him roll across the floor until he stopped far away, landing right at the feet of his companion, who had been silently watching everything. He looked down at the body thrown before him and noticed something extremely strange. He bent down to pick it up, and the boy quickly asked what he was doing. Holding the young man's family photo, he asked if that image was precious to him. The boy nodded and asked what he intended to do with the photo. The man said nothing, just stared at him in complete silence. He took a small cloth from his pocket and carefully, delicately cleaned the photo. He blew on it to remove all the dirt and handed it back to the boy. He told him to be careful with it because it was extremely important. His hand trembled like a green twig from nervousness, but he seemed sincere. Everyone was stunned by what he had done and couldn't believe what they were seeing. The girl's body was already covered, and he just stared at the cloth without showing any emotion. The doctor noticed that neither the child nor the girl were there, and the man said they had gone to the bathroom together earlier. That might have been a good thing, because they didn't witness the tragedy and were spared the worst. A blond man, somewhat agitated, caught the boy's attention and asked something unexpected. He asked why, if the boy could easily beat those guys, he hadn't done anything until now. The boy replied that they had something of his as a hostage, and that kept him from acting fully. Angrily, he asked if that simple piece of paper was so important to him and couldn't understand. Changing his tone, the boy replied that it really was important and couldn't be ignored. The man was startled by the way he spoke and slowly backed away without saying anything. While the boy looked at the photo, he said he wanted to ask something important to everyone there. Showing them the photo, he asked if anyone knew that strange type of plant. Everyone there replied they didn't know and had never seen a flower like that. The curious woman asked him where that peculiar photo had been taken. He replied that he didn't know, and that was exactly why he was asking all of them. One of the men commented that it wouldn't be hard to identify if they had internet access, but just by looking at the photo, he couldn't figure out anything at all. The doctor, intrigued, asked why he wanted to know the location of that mysterious photo. He replied that he intended to go there to find out more about it himself. They were surprised by the determination and coldness in the young man's answer, and the doctor expressed that he had seen how well he fought, but the surface was full of dangerous monsters. Even if he discovered the location, it would be extremely difficult to survive out there alone. But the boy disagreed, confident, saying he could survive easily and had already faced greater dangers. He hadn't expected to find people there who might recognize that strange place. They were interrupted by the boss, who arrived quickly and asked what was going on there. He was startled to see the boy holding the photo and remembered that he had told his subordinate to keep it safe. But he hadn't been able to follow such a simple order, and that deeply disappointed him. But none of that mattered now that they had reached this critical and decisive point. He decided to use more intuitive and completely drastic methods to solve the problem. While a fight was about to start down below, at the exit that was blocked by large debris, one of the monsters approached and began digging into the ground tirelessly, without stopping. But inside, no one noticed the imminent danger that was quickly approaching. Meanwhile, two men were preparing a campfire to make an improvised lunch. They finally managed to light the fire, but they didn't seem very experienced at it. The two didn't seem to know exactly what they were doing, but they improvised with many struggles. Meanwhile, the little girl stormed out of the bathroom angrily, complaining about something bizarre. She said everyone there was weird because no one flushed the toilet after using it. Laughing nervously, the girl explained there was no solution since the flush was broken, and no one knew how to fix the problem, leaving everyone uncomfortable and unsure what to do. As they talked animatedly, a man unexpectedly approached them. He said it was too late and that he needed to send them all back to the safe shelter. He asked her to stop looking at him like that, as he was only doing this to survive as well, while the other man who was helping make the food thought they were just joking. As he kept looking at those three, something unexpectedly fell into the hot pan. He wondered if the other man had put something in the pan, but he replied no, and told him to keep stirring the food without asking too many questions about it. He then thought it was just his imagination but remained suspicious, only for more debris to suddenly start falling from the ceiling, causing panic. He looked up to try to understand why everything was falling, and saw that a hole was starting to form in the old fragile ceiling, until it finally broke open completely, revealing something terrifying. A terrible monster came out of there and charged directly to attack him without hesitation. Back where the young protagonist was, the boss was extremely frightened to see the pitiful state of his injured subordinate. He then knew that his judgment about the situation had been absolutely correct. Back in the world he was immersed in, there were, at times, terrible people who defy humanity, monstrous people who had completely strayed from humanity and become something terrifying. Although now there were also real monsters roaming freely across the devastated Earth's surface. One of his disciples commented that the boy was much stronger than he appeared to be. The boy had given him just one powerful elbow strike that sent him flying far away. He didn't need to be told he was completely incompetent and unnecessary. All he needed at that moment was the mysterious and calm boy. Walking toward him, he said the boy had very rebellious and dark eyes, and that he would show him who was truly in charge at that moment. Standing face to face with the boy, he thought he might finally be able to see his true form. But then something strange happened. He ended up on all fours on the ground without any apparent explanation. It was as if he were being overpowered by something supernatural and suffocating. A vast dark presence began to form around him, frightening everyone, leaving them terrified by what was happening in that chilling moment. For he had been completely wrong in his judgment and didn't know how to deal with it. It wasn't him looking into that boy, it was the boy looking directly into him. He saw himself being swallowed by the monster that lived inside the mysterious young boy. He screamed desperately, calling for help from anyone who could intervene, and fell sitting on the ground with a terrible look of fear and confusion in his eyes. A concerned woman asked if he was okay and tried to approach him. But when he looked at the boy, he saw those terrifying eyes that seemed to wish for his death. He felt an immense and powerful aura emanating from the boy, something almost superhuman. And in his mind, he believed he had almost been swallowed alive by it. Everyone there couldn't understand what was really happening to the boss at that moment, for the boss trembled in fear and shock, while the others watched in confusion, and the woman wondered what it was about that boy that was so frightening. Then someone suddenly shouted, making everyone turn toward the source of the noise. A man, staggering and covered in blood, appeared, desperately asking for help. He said he couldn't see anything and seemed completely terrified. The boss was utterly surprised by such a sudden and unexpected event. The woman asked where all that blood covering him had come from. He replied that he didn't know, as he had just been quietly taking a nap. He said he'd had a headache since early that morning, but ignored the signs. But apparently, it wasn't just a simple headache he had, but something much worse. Afraid, one of the men asked if it could be the work of a monster. Rubbing his head, he asked what that strange thing was and said he didn't want to leave. Then he paused for a second, as if trying to process something. But suddenly, something shot out of the man's eye, like a bullet being fired, and it struck one of the men standing in front of him before anyone could react. Quickly, the boss stood up and grabbed what was stuck in the injured man's chest. Pulling hard, he brought the creature close to himself and examined it. Then he punched the monster man in the face, throwing him far away. The monster that had been inside the guy's head began to slowly emerge from there. The boss quickly grabbed an axe to defend himself against that grotesque creature, and the thing, which had once been only the head of a man, transformed into something much larger and more terrifying. The boss struck a strong blow with the axe at the creature, which fell to the ground beside the injured man, and quickly he went to finish the job without hesitation, to put an end to it. After cutting into pieces that monster that looked like a huge root, everyone felt relieved. They were a bit glad to see the creature stop moving completely, or rather to see that the boss had killed the monster, bringing a momentary relief. But he, on the contrary, was not pleased, instead wondering where that terrible monster had come from. Then he heard a cracking sound from afar, alerting him to a new danger. The girl said she truly thought she was going to die when she saw that, but now she was safe. Then several cracking sounds began to echo through the place, creating an atmosphere of tension. While everyone celebrated, the boy's eyes were wide with fear. He and the boss could hear the cracking sounds that everyone else ignored. And then, a huge monster smashed through the door and entered the place furiously. It wasn't just any door, it was a very dense and reinforced one. But that wasn't enough. The people were completely frozen, seeing it so close. That massive monster slowly rose, revealing its frightening and powerful form. And the people stood still, unsure of what to do in the face of such a huge creature. Standing face to face with a monster that size, no one could react. Perhaps it was because they had spent so much time in the subway, far from the outside world. They had ended up forgetting what they were really trying to forget, the true horror outside, the terrible memories and horrors they would have to face again to survive. Then, a man dropped the bat he was holding and began to flee in desperation. With each passing second, people became more afraid, slipping into panic. But then the boss shouted for them to face and fight the monster without hesitation. Those who were trying to flee stopped suddenly, surprised by the boss's determination. He asked how long they planned to keep running without facing the real problem, and if they were always going to repeat it again and again without ever facing their fears deeply. Pointing his axe at the monster, he said there was only one way to end this. It was different from before. If everyone fought together, they could defeat that huge monster. Everyone stopped and looked at the enormous creature, which now seemed even more intimidating. Perhaps it was because they had just seen the boss kill a monster before. Once again, it was his words that motivated them to act, sparking a flame of courage. One of the men said loudly, "If the boss killed a monster, together we can kill another too." The woman, looking at the bat on the ground, agreed. "We have nowhere to run. Let's face it." She picked up the bat from the ground and shouted with determination, "We're going to kill this monster ourselves." Overcome by a collective courage, they began to face the monster, attacking without hesitation. For the first time since the monsters had appeared, they no longer saw them as invincible. Monsters were no longer objects of fear, they were challenges that could be overcome. And it was there, in that moment, that for the first time they felt something long forgotten: hope. But that hope was shattered in an instant when they all looked at the boss. They saw him with a bleeding nose, while his body floated in the air in a sinister way. The monster they thought he had killed earlier was now controlling him from the inside. It possessed his body in a grotesque and terrifying way, controlling his every move. The people were in shock, as they had believed that monster was dead. Why? How is this possible? Someone whispered, eyes wide with fear. Then they understood a terrible truth. Monsters could never truly be defeated. Suddenly, the walls began to break apart, and more monsters brutally invaded the place. They attacked without mercy, ripping off heads and tearing bodies apart with extreme ease. Some people simply froze, unable to move in the face of such horrific scenes. Others tried to resist, run, or fight, but nothing seemed to work against the monsters. One of the monsters grabbed a girl who screamed desperately for help. She was trapped in its sharp teeth and pushed inside its monstrous body. Within seconds, her body was cruelly and irreversibly torn apart, throwing everyone into despair. The men who witnessed it only froze, consumed by absolute, paralyzing fear. People continued to be killed in brutal ways, one after another. These were scenes of horror that went beyond any limit of imagination. In the midst of all the chaos, the young protagonist watched everything from another room, in complete silence. The people who were still alive knew it was only a matter of time before they would be killed too. The man remembered the little girl he had been protecting, who was out there alone. He was held back by the doctor, who looked him straight in the eyes and asked, "What are you thinking of doing? I need to find her, the man replied, his voice trembling and his gaze fixed. The doctor, confused, tried to stop him. Why don't you wait? The monsters have already reached the entrance. Before the doctor could even finish his sentence, the man was already imagining the worst-case scenario. He fell to his knees on the floor, deeply lamenting, tears streaming down his face. It was just like last time. The same despair, the same feeling of helplessness. While kneeling, paralyzed by pain, he felt someone pass by him. Wait! The doctor shouted again as he saw the boy moving. Where do you think you're going? He asked, trying to reach him. But the boy didn't answer. He was already right in front of the exit door. Without hesitation, he took his first decisive step outside. Everyone inside was petrified, scared of what they were witnessing. The doctor tried to run desperately to stop the boy. Come back, don't do this. But it was too late. The boy had already set off into the middle of the fierce monsters. Without fear, he walked through the horde of creatures, facing them with a determination no one understood. He stopped for a brief moment, looking around, and took position to fight bravely. The monsters crawled along the ground, their huge, terrifying bodies moving over the remaining victims. Meanwhile, the three friends hid together under a table. The little girl was on the verge of crying uncontrollably, and the other whispered for her not to cry or she would give them away. She quickly swallowed her sobs, trying to calm down. Meanwhile, Haru thought she had no time to worry about other people, because she knew she would die if she stayed there frozen. As she was preparing to leave, the little girl grabbed her arm tightly. The girl was in shock, trembling with fear. Haru looked at her, startled and confused, because she didn't want to die, but she also didn't want to let the little girl die. She pulled her arm closer, telling her to stay very quiet. The corpse of a man lay in front of them, causing the man nearby to freeze in fear. Seeing the girls moving, he asked what they planned to do now. Haru replied that they were going to escape, and the man asked where, since there were no options. She said it didn't matter where, only that they stayed alive. He said that the woman from the surface had taken over, and now they had lost control of the only place they had. He asked if she really thought she could survive. She said she couldn't sit around waiting for her own death. Her words scared the man as he listened. She went on, saying she would survive no matter what it took, no matter what happened from now on. The man noticed the look in her eyes and the firmness in her voice, and it gave him confidence to also survive alongside her. But all that confidence didn't seem like it would last long, because a monster appeared right in front of the group. The man shouted for them to run now, but the young woman was frozen in absolute terror. He quickly found the courage to throw himself in front of the monster, holding it back and telling them to run without looking back, and that he no longer had any reason to keep living. But for the two of them, it was a different story. Looking back to where they had been, there was no one there anymore. Haru, pulling the other by the arm, quickly ran far away. He was left a bit embarrassed, since she hadn't even wanted to hear what he had to say. The monster attacked him, and Haru heard his screams from afar. Meanwhile, someone swung an axe furiously in the fight against the monster. But even so, it didn't seem to be going easily, because one of the former boss's subordinates was stabbing one of the monsters. But even after so many blows, it didn't seem to be hurting him, because he regenerated quickly, holding the man he had attacked with the axe. While the woman watched that scene, she collapsed to the floor, with no hope at all that they could win. But then the protagonist appeared, walking toward the monster. While everyone questioned what was with him and where he was going, several people were being killed by all kinds of monsters. And now it seemed to have taken over the body of the former leader. And in front of him, the young man positioned himself for a great fight. He seemed very determined about what he was going to do. The woman wondered if he really was going to try to fight, because that would mean he was simply asking to be killed right away. The creature unleashed all its long tentacles, which shot at great speed toward the young man. But none of that seemed to scare him much. And when they all reached him, he quickly dodged some, grabbed others with his hands, running and yanking two of them hard, twisting the tentacles around themselves tightly. One that was free quickly went to attack the boy from behind, but thanks to the sharpness of his incredible training, he dodged and the tentacles hit the wall. He fell to the ground as if finishing his risky trick. He stared at the giant monster, which roared in deep despair. The boy then slowly walked forward with confidence. He calmly released the tentacle that was in his hands behind him. The monster even tried to attack suddenly, but got stuck in the large knot it had tied itself into. He went to the back of the injured former leader's body, pulling and separating the monster from the inert man's body. He held that creature with all his intense strength, while the others were amazed that he had managed to stop that powerful monster. The woman shouted that it wasn't enough because the boss hadn't given sufficient results either. Another monster was already arriving, roaring in pure fury. Two others approached slowly, threatening everyone. The boy just stared at them, determined once again, and as soon as they moved toward him for a violent attack, he released the monster that had been clinging to the defeated former boss. He waited patiently until the monster came dangerously close. When it leaped with its horrifically open maw, the boy struck it brutally in the jaw with his knee, and immediately went for the second opponent. that one was ready to grab him and crush his vulnerable body. But he was quick, leaping elegantly over it. He quickly noticed the rusty axe stuck in its massive back. He swiftly gripped the axe firmly with both hands and pulled it down, brutally tearing the flesh of the monstrous enemy. But the fierce monster quickly counterattacked violently again. Thick fibers flew violently through the confined space, and those watching the boy fight were visibly panicked. All those thick fibers surrounded the boy, who kept advancing. And the people, surprised, wondered how he was still miraculously alive. After all that intense fighting, he had miraculously survived unharmed. While some only questioned, others had no reaction to what they had just witnessed. That supernatural brute strength was extremely terrifying, and his body was in constant, rapid supernatural regeneration. It was a completely suicidal act to fight such lethal monsters. But even facing all that in the terrifying sight of everyone present, a fearless young boy stood and fought bravely against fate. Even with some unbearable pain, he constantly remembered his father's wise phrase, "There is no mortal being in that world that doesn't die. For every and any living being, there must be some unknown reason, where exactly all their dangerous existence began." While everyone was deeply consumed by constant fear, the giant monster slowly approached the fearless young man. He kept patiently listening to the confident words of his beloved father, that if he went to seek it, he would know exactly how to survive. Charging boldly at the monsters with a balanced mind and absolute focus, using all the deadly techniques he had carefully learned during the time he was trained by the master, he only needed to discover where all their life truly began. Charging into another brutal attack on the monster, tirelessly seeking to understand exactly where its life originated. When he finally found where one of them was, he calmly prepared with his old lethal axe and struck hard at the hidden vital core, causing that terrible monster to be covered in deep wounds that weakened it, being sucked into the glowing seed that held its secret essence, vanishing little by little completely until the surprising result appeared before everyone. For that entire enormous monster had become nothing more than a small, mysterious orb, as if it were a strange ball of fur with a faint incandescent light trapped inside it. Everyone was completely frozen before what they were watching in astonishment, with no clear reactions to what had just been witnessed. They kept wondering if he had really killed that terrifying monster. But the horrible nightmare was still not entirely over. The two young girls came running desperately, fleeing from another, even more violent monster. The older one ran frantically through it all, never stopping, in absolute desperation, until a truly critical moment came. Running at her maximum limit, exhausted in order to survive the terror, she ended up passing in front of one of the enormous monsters, and saw a horrifying, terrifying scene. The monster was devouring the body of a poor person. That sight startled her, making her stumble suddenly. She fell right there in front of that terrible monster, who noticed the young girl's presence. She slowly began to get up, without the courage to look. Frozen with fear, staring at that monster approaching her, her mind was consumed by terror. Even without knowing exactly where she was going, she kept running. Quickly, she fled desperately from there without looking back. The doctor was astonished by her incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, she was already behind them without hesitation, seeking protection from that threatening monstrosity. The doctor was surprised she was alive and without any visible injury. While some felt relieved she was fine, the man remained thoughtful. He asked about the little girl who had gone with her, worried. Then a scream echoed through the place, cutting the silence. It was the girl, crying desperately. The little girl sobbed in despair, asking where exactly Haru had gone. The man who had been protecting her was thrown into complete panic, seeing the little one exposed to those monstrous creatures. As the monster slowly moved toward her, the man also ran to try to save her, and the girl who had left her there was completely in shock. When the monster was almost upon her, the man who had once given the girl his favorite food appeared. He came up behind her and the monster, ready to bravely save the little one. Everyone was extremely astonished because they had not expected that man. He managed to grab the girl before she was seriously hurt, and prepared to face that terrible monster directly. He began shouting insistently, trying to scare the monster. Amid the insults, the monster simply turned its back calmly and walked away. The man wondered internally if that had actually worked. Then the doctor calmly said that the shouting was not the reason the monster had left. While the protagonist fought bravely against the powerful monsters, the old man said that the main reason they were safe was the boy, who was quickly finishing off the monsters. And there he was, panting, yet still refusing to stop fighting, dodging the blows of various monsters with care, eliminating them one by one, though they still did not completely stop coming. If there had only been a few monsters attacking, the plan would have been to deal with them all strategically and restore the place's safety. However, the number of monsters he was facing now was 3, and unlike the previous 2, these had no blind spots. If he missed his attack, even slightly off target, their counterattack could be fatal. And most importantly, more monsters could probably appear. Taking into account the state of his physical energy, his chance of survival would drop drastically if he prolonged the fight much longer. He then seriously wondered if he should just run away. It wasn't that hard to escape from there, and he could probably quickly find a base to hide from the monsters. But if he wasn't there, the humans in the room probably wouldn't live much longer. He kept asking himself what those people had to do with him and why he had any reason to fight for them, since humans were his natural enemies, and the face of the woman who had treated him extremely well came back to his mind. But he didn't have much time to think about it. Moving quickly, he momentarily lowered his guard, and a monster attacked him, violently sinking its claws into the protagonist's back, and he fell to the ground, rolling completely. His shirt was completely torn, with some pieces caught in the monster's sharp claws. The boy lay there on the floor, trembling intensely after the blow he had taken. As the monster slowly walked toward him, someone unexpectedly stepped in front of the boy. It was the man who had previously saved the little girl. He then calmly asked if the boy knew an efficient way to kill those monsters. While the boy was extremely surprised by that, the man gave a slightly psychotic smile and asked exactly how he could help. Then the guy who had been looking after the little girl also arrived and said he would help too. That surprised the boy, as he hadn't expected help from humans, and he questioned why, still not understanding their intentions. He wondered why humans would help him without having any reason to do so. Then the man replied that it was so they could survive too. The protagonist didn't fully understand, but remained silent, deep in thought. The man then pointed out that if the monsters caught the boy, all of them would be killed. He extended his hand to the young man, waiting for his acceptance, who stared at him with a confused and suspicious look, while the man looked at him seriously and with confidence. The boy returned to his neutral expression, standing up on his own determined, because in his mind he still couldn't trust humans, since they would do anything to survive. He paused for a moment and thought deeply about what to do next. He asked them to distract the monsters while he tried to attack. The boy then thought that, as long as they shared the common goal of survival, there was no reason for betrayal. The man then warned that the monster was coming, and everyone got ready. He prepared for the fight, knowing he could no longer hesitate. He had many injuries and needed to finish this as quickly as possible. Then the monster was struck with a heavy blow to the head, while the man, grimacing, tried to draw the monster's attention directly to himself, and the protagonist charged toward another, larger and more imposing monster, because the first one to be eliminated was the one with a huge giant eye. The eye began preparing for something unexpected, and the protagonist was surprised. Then the monster fired a powerful laser beam toward the boy, who quickly threw himself to the ground, sliding down, but his sharp axe was hit by the beam and cut in half. But that didn't shake the boy, who charged at the imposing monster, which continued to launch multiple quick attacks, trying to hit the protagonist. And with great agility and skill, the boy dodged every attack with ease. He was already close enough to strike that terrifying abomination. As he rushed at the monster, it used its dangerous tentacles to defend and attack, but the boy skillfully avoided the attack with impressive agility, and repositioned himself to now strike the resilient monster with full force. Facing the monster, he swung his heavy axe for the blow, determined. He had already found the exact vital point of that thing, knowing where to strike. He knew exactly where to attack and delivered a precise hit. His axe sank deep into the monster's body, but it did not fall apart, and that truly surprised the boy, who thought the blow would be fatal. The boy had missed the strike by very little, which shook his confidence slightly. Then the monster prepared another powerful, deadly attack, full of rage, and the boy wouldn't even have enough time to dodge, it was so fast. When the monster unleashed the brutal strike toward him, the boy was left breathless. Then the man planted his hand firmly on his chest, pushing him back, bravely taking the hit himself with his shield, which surprisingly managed to block much of that violent attack. And when the beam suddenly ended, the boy was shocked by what the man had just done. He completely regained his focus and once again charged at the strong monster with everything he had, determined not to miss the strike this time and to finish it once and for all. Meanwhile, the doctor calmly spoke with one of the girls, saying he wanted to help but would only become a burden. They were trembling with intense fear, not knowing how to react to all the chaos, while someone quickly finished off a monster right in front of them, with precision. It was the woman who had once been the henchman of the boss who was now dead, and the boy had struck the crucial vital point of the monster he was fighting, finally killing it. The man curiously asked if he was hurt anywhere, while another, who was still fiercely fighting monsters, was completely astonished. Upon seeing what the monster looked like after being defeated, he grew even more curious. He asked eagerly how the boy had done it, because he no longer wanted to keep running in desperation from danger. He replied that all monsters have a special weakness and that you just have to strike it precisely, and he asked in confusion how to find those hidden weaknesses. The boy said he could only see them if he focused hard enough. Thinking he had understood something, the man shouted that it was always the monsters' heads, but the boy quickly denied it firmly, and the man said he really hadn't understood anything. But if the boy is the only one who can find those weaknesses, then there's only one thing they can do. They will attack together so he can find the weak points quickly. But the man with the mohawk runs toward the terrifying monsters, saying he's going to kill them all too. Another man is quite astonished as he didn't seem to be very afraid. Then each of them went directly for a monster, and the boy was thoughtful because fighting those horrible abominations had become much easier. He was surprised to be receiving unexpected help from humans. Thinking about it some time ago, he never thought he would get help from others. And the man with the mohawk kept fighting and mocking the damned monsters. While the boy was lost in thought about the unexpected help he was getting, something really surprised him. The mohawk guy was about to take a fatal blow from that abomination, being brutally thrown against the wall, and the boy was extremely outraged at the human's obvious weakness, because all of them were so different from him, completely vulnerable, and as a monster charged with everything it had toward the brave man. The boy quickly arrived with his sharp little axe, finally hitting its vital point and taking down the monster. The doctor was surprised. He knew people could really die if he didn't finish the fight now. Only one monster remained to be defeated, but he remembered something strange, a feeling that deeply bothered him. Then he recalled there was another dangerous monster just a few meters away, closing in violently. The monster had already made another helpless victim, leaving everyone with a sense of despair. Everyone was terrified by what they witnessed in that moment. The monster appeared, walking slowly over her body with a sadistic expression. It seemed to have completely overpowered the woman's body with overwhelming strength. Standing over her, it gave a terrifying smile, as if savoring the moment. She remained lying on the ground, motionless, with no strength to react to what was happening. The monster then suddenly stood up, charging toward the girl. Before it could even touch her, it was completely shattered, its flesh disintegrating. She opened her eyes, hardly believing she was still alive. She saw she had been saved quickly by the protagonist with impressive skill. Right after, he collapsed to the ground, far too exhausted, barely able to stand. He was covered in several deep wounds he had suffered during the fight. Everything was a terrifying mess, and no one knew how to react to such violence. The boy lying on the ground looked at the strange ball the monster had turned into with a puzzled expression. Slowly, he stretched out his trembling hand, touching the ball with the tip of his finger. He pushed his finger into that complex tangle of threads, feeling a strange sensation. Everything went dark suddenly, and he heard a mysterious voice saying he needed immediate treatment for his serious injuries. The boy was in a terrible state, barely able to breathe. People were deeply impressed that he had fought even with those injuries. Time passed slowly as everyone watched anxiously to see what would happen next. The boy began waking up confused, with a strong feeling of disorientation. He got up, still dazed by everything around him, trying to understand what had happened while still in shock. The boy silently looked at the girl lying next to him, still out cold and snoring as she slept deeply. The doctor, looking at the boy with a mix of surprise and admiration, said it was an impressive miracle that he had gotten up so quickly. The doctor asked, with a concerned expression, if the boy was really okay, explaining that he had been asleep for 2 whole days. The boy, surprised by the information, was even more shocked to notice the bandages the doctor had placed on his wounds. In a rush, he tore off all the bandages quickly, greatly startling the doctor, who watched the boy's actions with admiration. Upon checking the wounds, the doctor was completely in disbelief, as everything seemed to have healed miraculously. The doctor was truly impressed, never having seen such a fast and perfect recovery like the boy's. The man, upon realizing the boy had woken up, expressed his happiness, saying he could finally give a proper thank you. The boy, with a serious tone, replied that thanks were unnecessary and that he had fought only for himself. He then remembered the man who had fought alongside him, wondering if he was actually dead at that moment. The man appeared, saying not to kill someone who's still alive, despite his appearance, showing remarkable confidence. At the same time, the man coughed, spitting out a strange red liquid, which shocked the group. He quickly thanked the boy and asked why he had decided to help without any apparent reason, leaving him curious. The boy replied that there was no reason at all. He just wanted to help, asking if the man really wasn't a bad person. He kept wondering what made the man seem so strange, but before he could speak, the man already answered, mentioning the people who used to follow him. Indignant, the boy retorted that he had absolutely nothing to do with those people, and that they were the ones who saw him as a subordinate. The argument continued, with the mohawked man insisting that one should never judge someone by their appearance. During the conversation, the man playfully messed with the boy's hair, but the girl suddenly woke up, interrupting the moment. She quickly asked if the protagonist was really okay, but without answering, he questioned why she was sleeping there with them. Curious, the boy asked why she wasn't injured as well, like the other humans, but the girl became indignant. She asked if he was implying that he only cared about her because of that, her tone full of frustration. The doctor, noticing the tension, said the boy should thank her directly since she had stayed by his side the whole time. Embarrassed, she tried to deny it, saying she would never actually help the boy and that she was only there to help the doctor. The mohawked man, recalling a moment, said he had been impressed by the girl, remembering how quickly she had escaped from the monster. The man mentioned that he even thought she might have been possessed by some kind of spirit because of her ability to dodge so nimbly. The girl, in turn, recalled the sad moment when she let go of the hand of the defenseless little one, and she lowered her head in regret. Without saying anything, she quickly stood up and walked away alone, leaving everyone confused by her behavior. The mohawked man, seeing this, asked what was wrong with her, saying it sounded like a compliment, but the girl didn't care. She simply kept walking, leaving everyone behind, without caring at all about what he had said. The protagonist, watching the scene, remembered the request of the woman who had died a few days ago, asking him to reconcile with the girl named Haru. Determined, he went after her immediately, calling her by her real name, which surprised her deeply, leaving her silent. He asked if that was really her true name, and she, with difficulty, confirmed that it was, still keeping her emotions under control. Some time later, a man appeared with a strange list in hand and said that all the people who survived that chaos were now gathered there. He explained that, after 2 whole days, they had managed to identify exactly 43 dead bodies. The number of the group had been reduced by nearly 80% of the remaining people. He went on to say that they had discovered something very strange while collecting the suspicious bodies. The bodies were almost completely colorless and disfigured. It was as if they were looking at an ancient mummy that had died a long time ago in a tragic way. A woman then said there was a frightening monster that clung to dead corpses and sucked something from them mysteriously and silently. That was probably what had happened to the bodies. She asked what those mysterious and horrible creatures were. She said some people claimed they were created directly by the government as a secret terror experiment. More people kept sharing theories about what they said they had seen and heard before, speaking with fear. All those crazy ideas filled Haru's mind completely with doubts and worries. The grumpy man urgently asked for everyone's full attention. He said there was one more important thing they needed to address together immediately. He questioned the identity of that mysterious and enigmatic boy. He spoke about what everyone had seen him do right there in front of them. He questioned how he knew the correct method to kill the frightening and dangerous monsters. The boy then answered calmly and without nervousness. He said that his entire life he had been receiving intense training to prepare for the imminent and inevitable apocalypse. While he showed the photo to the woman, she calmly asked if that was the only thing he had brought with him. She went on to say that, to be completely sincere and honest, that photo alone still wasn't enough for her to fully trust him, and she remarked that it was something he could easily have made up convincingly. The fact that he claimed to have been trained in a bunker his whole life was unbelievable and surreal. He said he also knew that the apocalypse was indeed coming and would be devastating. The boy grew quite nervous because he knew the woman would never believe him. However, the woman continued serenely, saying she believed everything he had said. She began recalling the boy's impressive feats that no one could deny. She said she was absolutely certain there was no one there who didn't believe what he said after seeing what he had done with such courage. And that leaves the young man completely stunned and speechless. Suddenly, one of the girls tries to land a strong punch on him, which he calmly dodges and steps away from, and she's still surprised because he evaded it effortlessly and with such calmness. The boy's expression then shifts to a serious and concerned look, which makes her deeply afraid, quickly apologizing and saying she truly believes him. The doctor also calmly says he believes the boy, because when he was treating him, there were all kinds of visible and impressive scars on his body. He remarks that this was not something common for someone of that specific and vulnerable age, and he couldn't imagine how much intense pain he had endured to accumulate that unimaginable amount of scars. The girl, still hesitant, curiously asks how he managed to get so many scars over time. He calmly replies that he earned more scars each time he tried, unsuccessfully, to escape the bunker. She then gently says that it must have been extremely difficult for him, both physically and psychologically. But he quickly and firmly disagrees with conviction. He says that those scars are clear proof that he fought intensely, and he calmly doesn't think of them as bad or regrettable memories. Then someone suddenly says they don't believe him and questions his suspicious past, and a man unexpectedly appears among the people, questioning why he told others about the apocalypse that was really coming and about to happen. He states that everyone could have been better prepared if he had warned them earlier in advance. The protagonist silently remembered that his father always said humans were his enemies and dishonest. So maybe that's why he didn't consider cooperating with them honestly. He thinks that he doesn't trust any human either and always kept his distance, but some of them had helped him deeply in difficult moments. He didn't clearly know why his father taught him that humans were evil and treacherous beings, but he still believed that at least those people weren't that bad deep down. The woman calmly said that regardless of the current situation, he is very important to them now, since he was the only one there who could easily defeat the monsters without difficulty. It would be nice if I could sense exactly where their weak points are with precision. Then I'd finish them off easily, said the Mohawk man without hesitation. Meanwhile, another man told him that he would probably find important information about the monsters if he met his biological mother. And the grumpy old man says he doesn't even know if they'll be alive tomorrow, so that information doesn't matter in the end. Unfortunately for them, the entrance to that place is completely covered by the destroyed building above them. Therefore, that place has remained relatively undetectable to the monsters for now. They would have to go into the depths of the broken building, where there is almost no visible light, and pass through all the debris blocking their path, making it difficult to finally find an exit that would lead them out of the dark place. But that's all they know so far, and as the grumpy old man said, they've been lucky so far. It's not unlikely that the monsters will come in and attack them again just like before, without warning. But still, we don't have to be so pessimistic, said the Mohawk man with optimism. Seeing an obstructed exit, he asked if that was the ration storage. Seeing a partially blocked exit, he asked if that was really the ration storage they were looking for. He was quickly told that they think there's nothing useful left there to take, and one of the girls quickly picks up a pair of broken glasses lying there without thinking. Everyone gathered on one of the floors that was better preserved up to that point. The doctor then calmly says he needs some people to go to the surface to look for food and asks if there are any willing volunteers. Quickly and with enthusiasm, the Mohawk guy says to count him in, because staying underground for more than a week is suffocating for him. But another man says his wounds still haven't healed completely, so he'll go in his place without question. The doctor says the same applies to him, and that it was too soon to remove his bandages, so he should go back and rest immediately. So maybe someone who isn't completely injured should go urgently. Looking directly at one of the young women, she quickly shakes her head in refusal desperately. The grumpy old man says that going up to the surface is a suicide mission and only idiots would try it. Everyone the doctor looked at quickly refused out of fear. This was bad since they only had rations to last about a week if they didn't hurry. Then the protagonist calmly steps up and says he will go, even knowing the risks. The doctor says he would feel completely at ease if he went with confidence, and he remarked that as long as he had to go to the surface to meet other unknown people, to find out more information about that photo he mysteriously had, and maybe he could soon find a better base than the one they were in now. While he carefully prepared to leave the dark room, he said the most important thing was that he truly didn't like the underground and its unsustainable conditions. Then someone unexpectedly arrived and said they would go with him so he wouldn't be alone. A girl and a boy appeared to help him in his difficult mission, apologizing for not having helped him before and saying they had thought about doing something, but fear had frozen their bodies at the time. But they had gained courage after seeing him, and being the same age, realized how incredible his bravery was. The boy said he had risked his entire life to protect everyone else with determination, and that he himself would have simply run away without hesitation if he had been in his place. The doctor asked if anyone else was willing to go with them on this mission. Then the girl named Haru appeared with a mix of fear and embarrassment, approaching slowly and with her head lowered, unable to look directly at them. The doctor knew this would be very difficult for her both emotionally and physically. The two who had volunteered to go along were already properly prepared with backpacks, and they asked if the protagonist was completely ready to leave. He asked what exactly they were talking about and questioned the lack of a clear explanation. He was wearing only shorts while the others were loaded with survival gear and equipment. They asked if he was really going like that and said he should probably wear something more suitable for the situation. One of the women there came and handed him some clothes, saying she had sewn them for him while he was sleeping. He was quite surprised that she had made them for him with such care. Then she commented that he should feel honored because she was a top-tier designer, and that there was a time when people would line up to wear her unique clothes. Although that no longer mattered since her clients had completely disappeared, he looked at those clothes and immediately remembered his distant past, when he asked his father why he always brought him dirty and torn clothes, and if there was nothing else for him to wear. And his father showed him a closet full of identical clothes with sadness, telling him not to be disappointed because they were the same as his and he didn't deserve anything better. Then he said that wearing new clothes was one of the things he had always wanted to do since coming to the surface, and he thanked her deeply for the clothes she had made especially for him with care. She was very happy for him and smiled, satisfied with his sincere gratitude. She said that now that his first set of clothes was her work, he would never be satisfied with ordinary clothes again. Haru calmly arrived, asking for permission so as not to interrupt, and said she had something important to ask him directly. But when she looked at him, she completely froze at what she saw in front of her. The boy was standing completely naked in front of her without the slightest sign of shame. Everyone was shocked by that unexpected scene before them. The girl froze in front of him, staring at that unusual sight, and began to scream in utter embarrassment, not knowing what to do. She called him a pervert and tried to slap him in anger. He dodged easily, not understanding why she was attacking him for no reason. The girl ended up losing her balance and falling hard to the floor. During the fall, a scar on her forehead became visible to everyone around. She landed at the boy's feet, trembling in embarrassment. The protagonist had no idea what was going on in that awkward situation. While she lay on the floor, trembling with shame and discomfort, he asked why she didn't get up right away. She shouted back for him to just hurry up and put on his clothes immediately. He quickly agreed, still not understanding why she was so nervous. Then he silently put on the clothes the woman had given him carefully. Meanwhile, the man and the doctor were calmly talking about how the monsters knew about that specific place. The girl suddenly saw something unexpected that caught her attention, and said that those guys were distracted, cooking there without realizing it. She casually found a lighter and quickly grabbed it, saying it was hers without hesitation. And the protagonist directly said that the monsters might have been attracted by the fire from that flame. That left the two of them impressed because they hadn't expected the monsters to have such a peculiar trait. He discreetly told her not to light that thing, not even by accident, near them, because otherwise the monsters would inevitably return like last time, without mercy. Then the girl quickly hands the lighter to Haru with a worried look. Trying to get rid of it, she says she gave it to her as a sincere gift, and she immediately runs off without looking back. Someone then calmly approaches to talk to her with a curious expression, and directly asks if she is the girl who was on the Gesang middle school track team. A bit awkwardly, she answers and asks how he knows that, uncertain. He promptly replies that he knew he had seen her somewhere before. He says he recognized her because of the obvious scar on her forehead, and that she always looked really cool when she ran competitions. Then she vaguely recalls some memories that had been lost in her mind. In her dark thoughts, denying it with a feeling of rejection, that it wasn't exactly something cool as he suggested about her skill, because that scar was a constant reminder that she is a coward with no courage. Then some time ago, among other observing students, she remembered. Someone shouted her name and honked insistently in a loud voice. It was her loving parents saying they were cheering for her debut at the new school and that they loved her deeply. Even her little brother was there, shouting and wishing her good luck enthusiastically. She quickly hid her head under her hood as they kept shouting, asking if she could hear them. And the other watching kids wondered who she was and laughed loudly at the girl in that situation. They all laughed loudly at her without realizing her inner anguish. Her parents told her mother with concern that they hoped she would adapt well to the new school, because she used to be a very lively child, but since the incident she had become different. She had been so scared, so full of fear, that it was hard for her to live her daily life normally. The girl had suddenly been taken hostage some time ago during a traumatic situation. The people around were all in shock at the unexpected and dangerous scene. She unexpectedly bit the bandit's arm, trying to escape, and ran off desperately when he immediately let go of her arm. But right after, she tripped and fell badly, sending everyone into a panic. The bandit came running after her with fast and threatening steps, and the terrified girl's eyes were already filled with tears of fear. With a knife raised in his hand, he struck at her quickly without hesitation. But fortunately, it only made a shallow cut on her forehead, nothing serious. The girl was utterly terrified by it all. Not knowing what to do, she suddenly fainted soon after due to extreme panic, and some time later she woke up frightened, screaming in fear with wide open eyes. She was in the hospital, and her parents were there, happy and thankful that she had finally woken up. She kept trembling and sobbing in fear as she remembered the traumatic experience. Her father hugged her emotionally and said she didn't need to be afraid anymore, because they had already caught the man responsible. But she remained absolutely frozen in fear, unable to relax. The visible scar on her forehead had been silently covered by her hair ever since, and from then on, she was always downcast and introspective, avoiding looking at others. In the classroom, some random girls talked about scary things they had seen, and Haru from time to time saw the bandit's figure anywhere in her mind. Her classmate curiously asked her what she feared most at the moment. She confusedly questioned the meaning of the question and said she feared most of all dying, with a distant expression. Then she clearly realized they were talking about horror movies and unrealistic situations. Not long after, in PE class, the teacher was organizing a running competition, and some girls whispered curiously, pointing at Haru with interested looks. She kept her head down, always trying to go unnoticed, ever since she got that distinctive scar that still haunts her to this day. It felt like something strange and dangerous was always lurking around her, and that strange feeling always grew stronger when she thought about her past. Everything in front of her became completely white and hazy, as if she couldn't see anything clearly. That's why she definitely didn't like running, because of the terrifying memories. Because whenever she ran, she remembered when she was fleeing that frightening situation. So more and more, she ran desperately, without stopping, trying to escape everything, as fast as she could, without thinking of the consequences, overtaking everyone quickly in the race in the blink of an eye. All of it just because she is a coward, running away from her own emotions and fears. The teacher then cheerfully comments that it's an impressive new record, and all her classmates are amazed and excited, celebrating her incredible skill. They're all happy and say it was completely amazing, and she's too fast to be real. Other classmates excitedly start asking her lots of questions to find out her name and whether she used to be a track athlete. The coach confidently says she has immense potential as a runner, and that if she starts training with him, she could become the best track athlete on the team. But if she ran that horrible memory, the fear would immediately return to her mind, making her hesitate. But she silently encourages herself and says she will do it, facing her fears. Then 2 whole years pass, and the new determined athlete who started running broke a bunch of important records. A man curiously asks another if the scared girl is there, and he confirms, pointing at her. She calmly entered, and there was Haru, all sweaty after her exhausting run, trying to hide her fatigue. The man excitedly asks if they can take a picture with her to capture the moment. She calmly says they can, with a forced smile on her face. Then the man confidently walks up beside her, praising her for the incredible titles she has earned over time. To take the photo, he casually puts his arm on her shoulder, without realizing the tension it causes. But when he touches her, a confused whirlwind of memories floods her mind, leaving her terrified and frozen. The man didn't understand anything that happened, thinking it was just a friendly gesture, and the girl was in the corner of the room, completely frightened and gasping, trying to calm herself down. A few minutes later, the man nervously says that it made him feel bad, not knowing what had really happened. But he had also done absolutely nothing wrong. He had just tried to be friendly. Another man said the girl was a little strange and asked him to be understanding with her, because she was an admitted coward who runs from the smallest things despite being a famous and talented rookie. Later, at Haru's house, her family was quietly having lunch, ignoring the tension in the air. Her father irritably questioned why the internet wasn't working, disconnected from her emotional state. But the girl's mother calmly said he shouldn't use his phone while eating, trying to keep the peace. He slowly put the phone away and asked the girl directly how it went with that curious reporter who approached her, saying he had no idea she had such incredible running talent when she was younger, surprised at her, and now they could proudly watch her on TV, feeling a certain pride in her achievement. She bluntly replied that it was because of that incident, with no emotion in her voice. The main reason she became so good at running was that, not because she liked it, but to escape the fear. Everyone looked visibly downcast at her words, not knowing how to respond. She went on to say that when she ran, she always thought of that terrible incident that marked her, and it made her run faster, as if she were trying to get rid of something haunting her. So ironically, that was how she started running. Not because she liked running, but because she thought if she kept running, she would get used to it and completely get rid of the cowardly personality that limited her. But even after all that, she realized running would never be able to erase what happened. She was still a coward, a weight she carried alone without anyone truly understanding what she felt. She put on her silver bracelet and her jacket with a sad expression, reflecting on her limitations. Her father, trying to cheer her up, said she didn't really need to fix anything, that it was okay to be a coward sometimes. But inside she thought he was wrong, that nothing was okay with her. She was tired of being treated like a stranger because of her personality, because of her cowardice, and of the people who hated her for running from her responsibilities and problems, making her feel even more isolated. She remembered the words of the old man who had said there was something wrong with her before, as if it were obvious. It was exactly as he had said, and now she recognized that there was indeed something wrong with her. But despite that, she told her father it was fine that way, trying to ease the situation, and that he didn't need to force himself to make her feel better because it really didn't bother her anymore. Her father hugged her tightly, as if trying to convey all the love he felt for her. He said he wasn't trying to make her feel better, he was just telling her the truth. There's nothing wrong with being a coward. Nothing had changed before or after the big incident. He still loved her as his dearest daughter. He held her by the shoulders and firmly told her she no longer needed to hide that scar on her forehead, because it represents a reminder that she once fought bravely, something she can never forget. The girl, deeply moved, begins to cry silently, feeling so touched by her father's words, thinking that people didn't like her for being a coward, and that's why she tried so hard to change herself. But even with all that, she realizes there are people who understand her despite everything she went through. Her little brother, as always, teases her by calling her a crybaby, but she doesn't even react. She only remembers the words of her beloved father, who insisted there was nothing wrong with her, and that makes her feel that maybe it really is okay for her to be a great coward. Her father asks her to make a promise with him, a promise that would finally set her free from her fears. The promise that she will never cry again and must never think of herself as a coward. Her tearful expression slowly fades, and she gives a gentle smile, saying it's all right now. Her mother and brother say their goodbyes, smiling as they leave, leaving the two of them alone. She and her father look at each other affectionately, sharing that moment of warmth. When her mother goes to open the door to leave, brutal destruction suddenly begins outside. The sound of stones and debris falling fills the air, and the man, in shock, stares intently. Several stones strike the woman and the boy, quickly crushing them with massive boulders. Everything around begins to be obliterated, the reality of destruction taking an implacable shape. The giant, devastating monster has just destroyed that entire vast, desolate area, and the determined man runs quickly toward where his beloved son and cherished wife were buried. He starts removing heavy boulders disappears one after another. Then suddenly his expression changes drastically and visibly. Haru, frightened, slowly approaches her father, anxiously asking what exactly happened to her mother and brother. Then the girl becomes completely desperate at what she sees before her eyes. Seeing the amount of red juice flowing from her father's injured leg, she immediately begins running toward him, but he quickly shouts desperately for her not to come any closer. His blonde hair stands out among the hard stones soaked in strawberry juice. Upon witnessing that, the girl starts trembling and whimpering nonstop. She falls to her knees on the cold, damp ground, painfully remembering her beloved brother and also her dear mother. She is completely frozen there, surrounded by the flood of overwhelming emotions. Her father, with a firm voice, says she can still escape from there. She, however, only looks at him with tears streaming down her face. He continues with conviction, saying that he will stay there with her mother and brother, but she refuses to accept that painful idea and screams, rejecting his decision. He insists, saying she must not deny it, because he can't leave her behind under any circumstances, since she is the only person he has left, and he declares that he will not run away, because if he runs now, he will never be able to forgive himself for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, the people ahead of them run desperately from terrifying monsters, trying at all costs to escape a cruel fate. Haru, trying to be brave, says with determination that she will no longer run from what is happening. The terrifying monsters approach rapidly, and with every inch they get closer, she becomes more and more afraid, almost paralyzed. Her father simply accepts his inevitable fate with resignation, and the terrified girl begins to feel even more horrified at the sight of it all. Her father looks at her with a deeply sad expression, and the last sight she has of her father is etched in her memory. People and monsters start running past her, and in a matter of seconds, everything her father had said, that it was okay to be a coward, and that there was nothing wrong with her, he had actually been wrong, and she ended up abandoning her father, even after promising him she would stay by his side. And after that, over and over again, on many occasions being a coward and abandoning people, she was never able to forget. Then we return to the present time, where the fearless youths are already preparing to explore outside the safe hideout, and the protagonist looks at Haru, who was back there, head lowered and looking downcast. Inside, she was completely shaken emotionally. As they continue on their difficult path, the girl struggles internally with herself, until she gathers strength and determined. She takes off her worn-out jacket and puts on her old bracelet that she used to wear when she ran. The youths, who were already almost at the top of the worn staircase, are surprised as she runs past them at high speed. She stops in front of them and firmly says she will go with them to explore. In her thoughts, she reaffirmed to herself that she would no longer run away. The four young people were walking through the devastated streets of the city, now in ruins. The protagonist always walked in front while the others followed right behind, guiding them along the path that seemed the safest. He avoided the monsters they encountered along the way, while appearing to be quite calm. The others, however, were extremely nervous and tense, following in silence and exploring the surrounding areas, until they reached a place where the young man said they could speak now because it was safe. The other three were relieved now that they were a bit calmer. One of them asked Haru how the map was going, and she didn't understand. The protagonist explained that they needed to make a map because it was just as important as finding food, since with a map they could plan in advance where the supplies were. The determined girl said she would do it then, because she knew the neighborhood where she used to live very well. But she hadn't realized one important thing. The city had been turned into a barren and hostile wasteland, and everything she knew was now practically useless. The streets that used to be super easy to walk were now difficult and uneven paths, because the terrain was very different. They then gathered everything they found along the way, but felt that even after walking so much, they hadn't gathered as much as they expected. Most of the food was spoiled, and it wasn't just because it was summer, but also because the city had been without power for 9 days. In that case, they had no choice but to eat the food that would spoil first. One of the youths said. The girl said they should take everything to the base first, and then think about what to do. The boy went on to say they couldn't eat the food that had already spoiled, and that there was no chance of going back there again, because there were monsters everywhere. He also added that they had risked their lives to walk all the way there, so it would be unfair to have no reward at all. But the girl said that even so, she was against it, because she felt sorry for the people waiting for them at the base. Suddenly, a noise caught their attention. It was the protagonist eating the food they had found. They were surprised, and the boy quickly ran over to eat as well. He seemed amazed by that food, because the food in the bunker was only for nutritional purposes. But the food from the surface was truly different, and just eating it already made him happy. Haru came closer to him and said with a slight smile that she remembered when they first met. They shared a loaf of bread, and that at the time she had thought he was a complete idiot for not being able to recognize bread. Silence hung between them as the atmosphere grew more tense, and he held out his hand to her, offering 4 loaves, saying firmly that now he owed her nothing. She, on the other hand, didn't exactly understand what he was talking about at that moment. This left the protagonist visibly astonished, and Haru quickly remembered that when she had shared her bread with him, she had said he would owe her 4 times more. The boy wondered if she had really forgotten what she had said on that occasion, but then realized she had no intention of being paid back, and that she was the type of person who simply dealt with losses naturally. Innocently, he turned to her and said without thinking that she was quite stupid, leaving her completely angry, and she quickly replied that he wasn't the person who should be saying that to her. But soon time passed, and the 4 continued exploring the devastated city, with the protagonist always leading the group and pointing out the best paths. Earlier, when they were getting ready to leave, he had told the others they must never be discovered by the monsters, and that if they were discovered, they would have to fight, and even if he could get rid of them, the noise of the battle would inevitably attract more dangerous monsters toward them. If that happened, they would be quickly surrounded by an endless horde of terrifying aberrations, and that's why he warned that none of the 4 should be caught by them under any circumstances. The terrible monster suddenly fell right in the middle of the 4 youths. They were all completely astonished and frozen by it. In their confused minds echoed the protagonist's words, who had said that if something serious happened, they were to split up and run in different directions. Faced with this, the determined Haru wastes no time and mentally prepares herself to get out of there as quickly as possible. She starts running quickly in the opposite direction. Splitting up now would drastically increase the chances of at least one of them surviving this, but as she is about to pass by the boy, he firmly puts his hand in front of her, making her stop instantly. He softly whispers for her to wait very calmly, because he found it completely strange that the scary creature wasn't reacting in any way at that moment. The other boy, trembling with fear and full of dread, ends up taking a small, hesitant step back carefully, and the fierce, hungry monster quickly charges toward him with force. Then the protagonist clearly and quickly notices that the monster reacts intensely to sound. Haru is startled by everything that's happening, and before she can scream in desperation, the young man quickly covers her mouth, making a clear hand gesture for her to stay absolutely silent and still. The boy, who was almost attacked, quickly and clearly realizes that complete silence is necessary, and he immediately covers his own mouth, filled with fear and nervousness. Preparing carefully, the protagonist knows things will get completely out of control if this dangerous fight ends up attracting all the terrible monsters lurking nearby. So he realizes he must handle this with a single, precise, and decisive strike. Earlier, one of the men at the dark subway station had given the boy something important, saying he had no intention of going up to the ruined surface with him, but that didn't mean he wouldn't do anything while keeping his precious stored rations. And the protagonist promptly asked with curiosity what it was that he had just received. He was quickly told it was a special weapon the man had built after observing the impressive way he fights, and that it was a powerful weapon capable of easily striking the weak and vital points of the terrifying monsters. Even without ever having used it before, he already seemed ready to wield it with great precision. And then, as if by incredible and surprising magic, he charges at the monster with extreme speed and unbelievable agility. He prepares his single fatal strike, knowing it must be precise so as not to cause too much commotion or chaos. He strikes the monster with a precise and very powerful blow, right at the exact spot that hits the vital point of the giant, dangerous monster, which in an instant falls apart entirely into several strips. The bright sun then begins to set, and the shining moon takes its place in the sky. The boy calmly plays with the little orb the monster turned into, while all the others are already preparing to sleep. He is carefully examining the weapon the protagonist had received, remembering several things from his past, where his father clearly told him not to rely on weapons and that he should be able to drive them away with only his bare hands. He wondered if, when he kept insisting on driving them away, he was referring to the humans on the surface. His father directly said that it was indeed about them, and that weapons don't suit people like them, and that soon he would understand everything. What he was talking about now, carefully storing his weapon, the boy thought about how his father said he would understand, but there was no way to fight monsters without a weapon. But his father never spoke directly about the monsters while they were in the bunker. Maybe he thought the boy would never believe him because he himself didn't believe the apocalypse was coming. But now the boy understood better, the unexplained training his father put him through, everything he had to endure courageously, to survive against all the monsters. But there is something he still doesn't fully understand. His father had said he had no plans to release him from the bunker. But if that were truly the case, there would have been no need to train the boy for the possibility of going to the surface. The boy kept wondering if all of that had been a lie, if he had never intended to send him to the surface. But he didn't believe it had all been an act, because his father rarely lied to him, apart from saying his mother had died. If his father had really never planned to let him go up to the surface, then the training had been part of his father's overall regimen, the boy thought. On the day the apocalypse began, his father was the only one who could open all the bunker doors at once, but that didn't seem to be part of his original plan. If he hadn't escaped from the bunker, he would have died, having been targeted and attacked by the monsters that quickly invaded the bunker with all the force they could muster. So with this flood of thoughts and deep memories, only two important questions remained in his mind. Why were the monsters targeting the bunker? And the most important reason, how did his father know the apocalypse was coming? Meanwhile, the boy was there playing quietly with the monster ball and wondering what world it came from and that he couldn't even break it. He gently asked the girl if she wanted to touch it too and tossed it to her. She held it in her hand for a moment, then threw it back toward the protagonist, saying it was disgusting. He watched it travel slowly toward him and touched it with the tip of his finger. But then a strange sensation occurred, and he ended up dropping it on the ground. It rolled across the floor. The other boy asked in shock what had happened. The protagonist, with a stunned look, picked up the ball from the ground again gently, holding it firmly and looking at it intently. The other boy said they should sleep since they had a long and arduous journey ahead tomorrow. Even so, the boy stayed there in shock, staring fixedly at the ball in his hand as it slowly began to open, and then shattered completely on its own without warning, leaving him unexpectedly surprised. While all this was happening, Haru, lying down, clearly remembered the things that had happened earlier, how she had prepared to desperately run from the monster, thinking about how she had promised herself she wouldn't run away anymore, and yet still tried to flee alone in fear, just like when she had cowardly abandoned the defenseless little girl. So she decided that when she returned, the first thing she would do was sincerely apologize to her. The protagonist, already ready to sleep, had an old distant memory come to mind, but even he questioned what that strange memory was. Then he realized it was from a time when things were different, a time when his father was normal like everyone else, but that was so long ago that he had almost completely forgotten it. His father calmly asked if he wanted to read the book, and the boy immediately said yes. He went on to say that it was a book from his distant hometown. It's a story about a hero, and his name is unknown. But then the dream ended abruptly and unexpectedly. As he slowly opened his eyes, he vaguely saw Haru's silhouette. He understood absolutely nothing about what was going on. The girl was on top of him, silent. She quickly covered his mouth. Trembling, she hurriedly pointed to the side. A sound was coming from within some destroyed rubble. The boy looked closely, and the girl, full of fear, was trembling, her eyes wide as she waited for whatever would come out of there. Then a simple little mouse appeared startlingly. She felt relieved to see it was just an insignificant rat. Then their eyes met, and they stared at each other as she sat on top of him. Innocently, he said she was heavy and kindly asked her to get off. She was unexpectedly taken aback by that. She immediately began to tremble with rage and shouted that she was not heavy, and the protagonist boldly told her to be quiet and called her a scaredy cat. The night passed, and the next morning she was watching the city through binoculars carefully. She was observing gigantic monsters in the city slowly, several monsters everywhere in sight, and she continued to draw the map she had set out to make in detail. Then the protagonist came up to her and asked how the map was going, since he intended to leave there soon with urgency. She replied that everything was going well and asked him to call her by her name affectionately. The other boy asked what her name was, curious. He said he had never been called by a name since he was a child, innocently. The girl was intrigued about what they should call him, since they couldn't just keep calling him you all the time. She suggested they make up a name for him right now. The boy was speechless because he was finally going to get a real name. Haru joked that his name should be stupid so it would be easy to remember. He didn't even pay attention to what she said because he was completely surprised by what was happening. He remembered his distant past, a book he had read a long time ago, and then he calmly said the name he wanted to be called, Blue. Everyone was surprised by the unusual name. Haru said it was a strange name and asked if there was any meaning behind it, curious. He replied that no, it was just a name he had seen in a book he read when he was little, unexpectedly. The girl then suggested that they introduce themselves since they hadn't done that properly before. She said her name was Yujin in a friendly manner. The boy said his name was Ji-yun, but they could just call him Hyun easily. Haru said her name and mentioned that probably a certain idiot wouldn't remember names so easily. Soon it was the hesitant protagonist's turn. Everyone stared at him intently, fixedly. In his mind came memories of when he was in the bunker, writing carefully. Plans and more plans he had for when he got out of there. He introduced himself by confidently saying his name was Blue. But it wasn't just that. He remembered how he began the plans he had meticulously written, and he finished by sincerely saying it was a pleasure to meet them. Haru was pleased with his words and thanked him. The other two said it was also truly a pleasure to meet him. That suddenly awakened a different feeling inside him, because then, all of a sudden, he remembered everything clearly, all the dreams he had when he was in the bunker, that when he went to the surface, he wanted to exchange greetings with other sincere people. And not just that, he had always wanted to have a real conversation with them. So now, right where he was hopeful because he could possibly become friends with them with joy. Han extended his hand to him, saying they were now true friends. Everything he dreamed of while in the bunker was happening magically. Seeing his new friend standing in front of him waiting, going to greet him as well, but things came to his mind like a flood. while slowly extending his hand with hesitation. The number of people who had died just a few hours ago recently, he quickly and carefully lowered his hand and simply said no firmly. The girls didn't understand anything at first, but no one said anything about it, and the day just went on normally. The atmosphere became strange between him and his uneasy companions, and he kept leading the quartet cautiously, still thinking that if it weren't for the apocalypse, he could have easily been their friend. But finding his mother came first desperately. It was not the time to truly fulfill his dreams, but his thoughts were interrupted by a very loud and distressing scream. A man a bit farther away from him was being attacked by a not so big but dangerous monster. He screamed desperately, fighting against the creature non-stop. Someone then prepared to rush over there quickly, but Blue quickly stopped her, questioning what exactly she was thinking. Yujin said they should help the man because he could die if they didn't do anything. The other two just watched apprehensively, unsure of what to do. The protagonist said they wouldn't do anything because the fact they heard the screams meant other monsters also heard and would come there quickly. She kept insisting they could save him and hide before the monsters arrived. It was already deeply irritating him. He asked if she didn't remember what he had told her before leaving the bunker, and that she had promised to only do what he said in exchange for coming to the surface. The girl didn't seem to agree with that, while the man kept screaming desperately. Then the girl gathered courage and ran off from where she was, leaving Blue furious and worried. On the way, she picked up a piece of wood and charged toward the man with determination. When he saw her, it gave him a glimmer of hope. She quickly drove the piece of wood into the back of the monster with all her strength, throwing it violently away from them. It rolled across the ground away. The man, frightened and with a trembling voice, asked if there were more people with her. She, in turn, told him not to worry because they would take him somewhere safe and asked him to just keep quiet. But then the man screamed again, saying something was coming up behind her quickly. The monster was already close enough to bite her, but Blue arrived like a hero and saved her immediately, and the man was astonished at his speed and especially at what he had just done to the monster, while the protagonist didn't seem at all pleased with the girl's actions and said she had just put all of them in danger. The man said his legs seemed to be broken. Soon someone would have to help him walk, and Blue knew something like this could happen. But then snapping sounds from afar indicated the monsters were coming there because of the noise. So he told the man they couldn't help him anymore, because they had already put themselves in enough danger by saving him from that other monster. He slowly turned to Yujin and said that if she wanted to help that human, he didn't care much. But in that case, she was not to follow them together. That left the girl in total shock. He went on saying she had promised to do what he said in exchange for coming to the surface in one piece. Hyun was also scared with that whole difficult situation, but he gathered courage and said that Blue was right and that they didn't have time to worry about other people right now. He finished by saying that there were people waiting for them at the secret base. She, struggling against her true principles, agreed and said she would go with them soon. That completely surprised the protagonist. While they discussed this, the man was desperate about being left there alone. For a moment they didn't even remember he was nearby. Then the man said he would die if they left him there helpless, and that this was a cruel murder. He shouted that they were going to kill someone easily without reason. Blue told him to shut up right away. More monsters were running quickly toward where they were. With each passing second, the man became more desperate and confused. The boy knew he really needed to get out of there as soon as possible. In the midst of his total despair, the man took a deep breath, rethinking his whole life. Meanwhile, whispering, Haru asked what they were going to do now with monsters coming from all dangerous directions. He replied that it wasn't the worst yet and that they should escape while they still hadn't been caught. Where they came from, there were no monsters along the way as long as they went back the same safe path. Then suddenly, the man started lighting a cigarette carelessly, leaving everyone terrified and asking what exactly he was doing. The man pointed to the nearby wall, where there was a sign clearly saying smoking permitted. Hyun got angry and said that wasn't what they were talking about, but in case he hadn't noticed, fire dangerously attracted them. Before he could even finish talking, the man interrupted him and said he knew that monsters were fatally attracted to fire. He had accidentally completely destroyed the place where he was hiding, and the boy asked why he was using a lighter so irresponsibly. With each passing second, more and more monsters were mercilessly approaching, coming in full force to obliterate everyone there quickly. Meanwhile, the man smoked calmly and carelessly, asking if they didn't think he could at least smoke a cigarette before dying peacefully. The smoke rose into the dark sky as the monsters leaped from the tops of tall buildings. Blue then shouted for his companions to run from there immediately. In a matter of seconds, the man was already attacked fiercely by one of the monsters. So that his companions could escape, the protagonist prepared to fight intensely, wielding both sharp weapons with skill, and his companions followed his order and ran away desperately. Hyun, who was running frantically down the street, then saw a figure ahead of him, Haru, frozen in place, staring fixedly at Blue with a look of intense fear, and he turned his eyes to his friend with concern. Seeing him fighting bravely against the horde of furious monsters, eliminating them one by one, though more kept coming. The boy seriously questioned himself, why wasn't he running with them? And he was still there, fighting bravely and tirelessly, dodging and striking the monsters with the greatest skill possible, sometimes dodging by the smallest dangerous margin from a monster that was nearly twice his size, seeking to spot the vital point of each vulnerable monster, striking and taking it down quickly, and relentlessly eliminating more and more monsters, as he prepared to face other larger ones that, by the looks of it, were very big and dangerous. Then a stone suddenly hit one of the monsters in the back, which completely surprised the protagonist. It had been Hyun who had thrown the stone desperately, and everyone was very afraid of what they had just done. Blue asked why they had done that if he had told them to run away immediately. The boy shouted that they wouldn't do it again, and asked why he wasn't running with them. Then he himself wondered in confusion why he wasn't running. He realized it was because, suddenly, he had thought they would die if he ran away. The boy who not long ago had been smiling calmly was now facing some fierce monsters, and the same went for the frightened girl, who had been calm until a few minutes ago and was now fighting bravely. A little farther back was Haru, frozen, trembling with fear, not knowing whether to help or flee quickly. Several monsters had already been turned into small balls. Blue kept telling them to run far away quickly, and Hyun said he felt calmer now because there were fewer monsters than before, and if they all fought, they could eventually reach the base safely. But in the distance came a different monster with a dark spirit. The protagonist saw it coming from afar slowly, and was deeply frightened by what he saw. The monster had 4 strange vital points, spread across its body, which of all of them was the most human-like in a terrifying way. And with its horrible faceless head, Hyun noticed Blue's frightened expression and looked back, already with visible fear, when he saw the monsters approaching, and their behavior completely different. They were all showing reverence to the monster in the middle of them, respectfully. The boy froze in fear when he saw that unexpected sight. Blue shouted at him to run immediately. When he turned desperately to his friend, the monster appeared between them, holding a bloody heart in its hand. The heart was still beating strongly. The boy's hands trembled, and he slowly dropped the piece of wood to the ground. It was his heart that had just been brutally torn out. The girl was desperately calling her friend's name in agony, while the protagonist just stood there, frozen, with a terrified look, something we had never seen so intense until now. Then, turning his fear into explosive rage, he furiously attacked the monster in front of him, but as if it were nothing, impressively. When his weapon touched the monster, it broke easily. There he was, without a weapon, facing the imposing abomination. With just a simple, powerful flick, it hit Blue and threw him violently far away. He rolled for many, many meters desperately, and was left gasping after the powerful blow he had taken, spitting blood, something that until now had never happened so dramatically. The bones in his chest were now cracked. It crushed Ten's heart with a loud crack, the strawberry juice quickly running down its hand, and dripping to the ground drop by drop, like a scene of despair, only made the monster more enraged, and with an insatiable thirst for blood. It quickly signaled for the others to advance without hesitation, and other monsters charged furiously toward Blue, who was extremely weakened after the fatal blow he had suffered. The girls were frozen in pure fear. Even with great difficulty, he firmly told them to run from there. He stood up, staggering, determined to face the monsters. Haru, watching him with a renewed hope to save them, felt her heart almost exploding from the tension. But she couldn't just run from there, because if she ran now, she would end up abandoning, once again, those who were truly important to her. So she quickly dropped her backpack to the ground, grabbed a piece of wood within her reach, and ran with courage to help Blue, who was already barely able to stand. When the monster was about to attack him, the girl arrived and pushed him, getting him out of the way of the blow and being struck brutally instead. Blue was shocked by what had just happened. Haru, who had been motivated to fight again, completely froze. Yujin apologized to them with a tone of regret and said this was all her fault, because she had put everyone there in great danger. So because of that, she asked them please at least to survive. She finished saying and ran straight into the middle of the monsters, drawing their attention. And in a matter of seconds, she was devoured by them. Blue was horrified. Another one of his friends had just died right in front of him. The monster, who was apparently the leader of the others, walked slowly among the abominations, and with its monstrous hand, took from several bodies more vital points, holding them in its many hands as if they were trophies. The protagonist was in disbelief at what was happening, but it couldn't end so easily like this. While Haru trembled like a leaf in fear, he wiped the strawberry juice from his mouth with some difficulty, stood up with the last strength left in his body, and firmly told the girl to run without looking back. This was her last chance to run and save herself. The monsters surrounded what was left of Yujin's body, while the boss walked among them with its threatening presence. Haru asked with a trembling voice what he was talking about and what he was going to do. He kept walking toward the monsters without hesitation, leaving the girl desperate, asking if he had gone completely insane, and that he had been the one earlier telling her to run away. He replied that she was right, And that had been the right decision to make, she screamed, asking why he was doing this then. Blue said with a distant look that it had been fun, doing things with them, sharing those moments with all of them, eating with all of them, laughing and having fun by their side, introducing themselves to one another as if they were old acquaintances. Every time they met, they understood each other more and more. It made him think about how the things he had dreamed of in the bunker were truly enjoyable. But it all ends if they die. If everyone dies, they won't be able to talk anymore. They won't be able to call each other by name. And beyond all that, they could no longer be friends. And once, one of the humans at the base asked him if he had ever felt sad for losing someone important to him. Until then, he hadn't understood, but now he could understand it clearly. And so he told her to run away immediately, because he didn't want to see them die anymore. As strange as it was, Blue was crying desperately for having seen humans die. Haru was in complete shock at the boy's words, and at what had happened to her friends around her. The two of them dead before her, motionless. Fear completely consumed her, but she didn't want to live through that again. She couldn't. Someone sacrificing themselves so she could flee desperately. It was just like last time, exactly the same. Blue was doing exactly what her father had done, bravely, and she was in the same state as before, paralyzed. Hearing that she should run away immediately, she questioned why all this was happening. Why were they telling her the same thing over and over? Fighting with herself, she shouted that she would not run because she had changed her mind completely, and she would never run away like before, ever again. She no longer wanted to remember that terrible moment, the moment when she abandoned her father desperately, leaving him to be obliterated by the violent monsters. She was so afraid of remembering the way he had looked at her deeply. Her father understood her completely. He had said it was okay to be a coward, that there was nothing wrong with her. But she had just abandoned her father, powerless, because she had been so scared, just like she was at this very moment. Then the doubt came into her anguished mind. What if her father had hated her in the last seconds of his life, maybe? All her thoughts were abruptly interrupted. Blue said he didn't think she would decide on her own not to run, but he had known it from the beginning, because she really was the type to accept her losses. That sentence lit up all her thoughts, and even in his final moments, her father, looking directly at her, had a slight gentle smile on his face. And that was a great relief for her, because even in his last moments, he had loved her unconditionally. She clearly remembered the promise she had made with her father, that she would never cry again, and should never think she was a coward. Her father had smiled confidently at her true potential, and through her tears she had sincerely agreed with him, linking their pinkies tightly to seal the promise. Her mind quickly returned to the present situation, where she and Blue were being quickly surrounded by monsters. She then asked him with concern if he hadn't said himself that everything ends if they die, and that he didn't want to see anyone else dying. She came running with determination to help, telling him not to underestimate her because she wasn't going to die. She was going to live for sure, no matter what happened, so nothing was over yet, pouring gasoline on her sneakers quickly, and continuing to say that they could share even more conversations if they stayed alive, and always call each other by their names. Those words left the boy completely stunned. She finished by saying that they could also become true friends. She lit the lighter she had been given the day before by the girl at the station, and all the monsters present were already watching closely where the flame came from. Blue asked her cautiously what she intended to do. With tears in her eyes, she told him not to give up, because they were going to live intensely, no matter what happened. She had always run for her own sake, but from this moment on, something would change forever. With her feet blazing with intense flames, she was completely determined to run for the sake of others. The monsters began running frantically toward her. Getting ready to run, she told him she'd meet him at the base safely. Blue was in total shock at what was happening. Monsters and more monsters were desperately appearing behind her, and more monsters emerged relentlessly, all charging wildly after her without stopping. She dashed off running with her feet burning brightly, leaving a trail of intense fire wherever she passed. Very fast, she ran determined to survive, but the monsters were already starting to attack fiercely. With great skill, she dodged their attacks nimbly. For every attack she avoided, another came unexpectedly right after. But like a top-level athlete, she evaded with impressive acrobatics, becoming faster and more agile, climbing over rubble with incredible precision. Several monsters followed behind her, drawn by the fire on her feet. But not for an instant did she stop running, because she had promised her friend she would survive. Then the monster boss began moving after her dangerously. It seemed stronger than before, threatening, taking slow, powerful steps, drawing closer. But Blue stepped in front of it and asked where it thought it was going, because now its opponent was him, determined. That monster looked extremely strong and unbeatable. It couldn't be compared to any of the monsters he had fought so far, colossal, and he could clearly see the seeds of that horrible thing. He could also feel the energy emanating, the overflowing life force within it, threatening. Gasping and spitting blood, he was desperate. He had no idea how to defeat that thing, but he would fight. Nothing was going to shake him, not even the pain. He saw one of the weapons that was left, with hope, and ran with all his breath. When he was close to reaching it, the monster kicked him away. He even managed to block the blow, but the enemy took the opportunity to break the weapon the protagonist was going for. Recovering after the hit he had taken, he realized the monster was targeting his weapon because it knew it was dangerous. The beast walked toward the boy, who thought that now, without his weapon, he wouldn't be able to hit the enemy's weak spot. But he quickly remembered his father telling him to never depend on weapons, because weapons don't suit people like him. But the boy would only understand in the future what he meant, and he wondered what his father was trying to say with that. With a smile on his face, he said that even without using such weapons, they were still the strongest. And now the boy noticed his father had never used weapons. That gave him confidence. He began forming his stance, with one hand forward, fingers shaped like a claw. That stance was the strongest of all, the human stance. In his memories, his father told him to remember that, because that stance was meant to prepare him. Every organism carries a life force, humans on the surface, beasts and plants. Even the two of them possessed life force, so it was meant to use that power. The hand is the path through which your life force flows. The focus is on the tips of your fingers. His father then positioned his fingers, with the life force flowing strongly, perfectly manipulating that power. The protagonist even copied his father's movements, but it made no difference to him because he felt nothing and wondered if it was really true. And his father said he wasn't ready yet, but the moment would come when he could use it. Apparently, that moment had arrived. The young man assumed the stance he had been taught. He knew that when he finally felt his life force, all that power would be his, and it was flowing through his whole body. The boy found it strange what was happening because his body was very hot, as if it were on fire. In the past, he had asked his father what would change if he could use this power. Smiling, his father answered that he would be able to move a little like him. Then the boy took his first step. The world seemed distorted, everything moving frame by frame. The monster ran to attack the protagonist from behind, but when it was close to touching him, just centimeters away from ending the fight, the boy quickly turned to the enemy, already preparing his punch, that landed right in the monster's belly, so strong that it hurled the abomination far away. But it managed to stop its body, and for a moment it trembled at what had just happened. It stared intently at the protagonist, who was panting with the power coursing through his body, but now he could see the movements of that thing, and finally his body was fast enough to react to it. It was as if everything had slowed down, except for the two of them. His whole body felt like it was on fire, as if his blood vessels were burning. Then, at that exact moment, he was certain he could fight that thing as an equal. The two stared at each other, and then quickly, the monster charged to attack. Blue got into position, waiting for the monster, which quickly closed in and attacked, but the boy dodged and prepared to strike the monster, which managed to grab his arm. Squeezing with great force, it pulled the boy in quickly and threw him far away, but with great agility, he managed to steady himself. The enemy didn't even pause and kicked the protagonist again, who dug his feet into the ground, trying to stop his body. Several arms then sprouted from the monster's body. All of them tried to strike the young man, who luckily dodged all the attacks. And as the monster came at him again, he found an opening and attacked the abomination, sweeping its legs. As the monster fell to the ground, he readied his punch and hit the enemy squarely. The energy in the boy's body transferred into the monster's body, boosting the power of his punch, making the monster back away from the boy in fear and pain. This even surprised the boy, for it had worked. The monster then, he used the arms he had created to protect his weak point, and that was going to make things harder for the boy from now on, because his power still wasn't enough to cause damage to his enemy's weak point. He knew he would need more, much more power to be able to defeat that thing. While focusing on trying to increase his power, he remembered the people he had just lost, eliminated right before his eyes, and Haru running with several monsters chasing her. That was the power he should have had from the start. The energy coursed through his body with much greater fervor, running through all his veins and nerve links, taking over his whole body, making his blue eyes shine intensely. He then took the same stance as his father, looked at the enemy with a gaze full of rage, and shouted, calling it to fight. The monster, which now seemed to be in a second stage, looked at the boy and charged toward him, leaving a trail of destruction in its path. Our protagonist watched the monster coming toward him, and when it was about to attack, with just one movement, he tore out the monster's vital points. The monster was left with a hole in its body, and as it was falling, the boy remembered that if he had been just a bit stronger, no one would have died. After using so much energy, he fell to his knees on the ground, his head to the floor, eyes almost closing. He saw the shadow of his enemy beside him, so he quickly tried to get up, but he was too weak. When he looked at the monster, he saw that it still had one vital point left, and it grabbed the bodies of the protagonist's friend and the girl by the neck. Blue crawled on the ground, telling the monster to let their bodies go. It pulled the two of them in front of itself, and with that began regenerating its body. Soon after, it grabbed the protagonist by the neck, lifted his body up in front of it, stared directly at him, and gave the boy a psychotic smile. He was already growing disoriented, seeing his friends' bodies lying there, Then his vision started turning red, and he no longer knew what was happening. He was starting to fall asleep, as if sinking into a hole with only one thought left in his mind. The last sight he had before closing his eyes was the monster smiling at him, as he fell into the hole inside his mind, being engulfed by what was there. The only thing running through his mind was that he wanted to kill that thing. Then something startled the monster. The boy woke up with red eyes, and he grabbed the creature's arm, which in turn seemed to not understand what was happening. That overwhelming aura the boy had begun to radiate filled it with fear. With great strength, the boy squeezed the monster's arm, and with just one movement, he separated the monster's hand from its arm, pulling the hand off his neck. The creature was terrified by that look in our hero's eyes, and that absurd aura surrounding him. He then charged at the monster, which, desperate with it all, screamed with all its might. While all this was happening inside one of the ruined buildings, outside the sun was strong and a few people were looking at the map, saying they were almost there and that the boy should be nearby according to it. It was the people who had stayed at the train station, searching to find the boy. Soon the girl called the others' attention, saying she had found the boy. Then the man picked him up, slung him over his shoulder and gave thanks that he was alive and only unconscious. The Mohawk guy was shocked and asked what could have happened there. When the man looked, his eyes widened in astonishment. Where there had once been a building, it had been destroyed, leaving only the part that hadn't been blown away. But they didn't have time to unravel that mystery because night was about to fall. The guy complained to the girl that she was falling behind because of all the bags she was carrying, but she didn't want to drop any because they were all rations for them to eat, and she planned to eat a lot when they arrived. Gently, he'd offered to carry the bags for her, and she accepted without hesitation. When he took the bags, he threw them into a hole. She screamed, asking why he had done that, and was told she didn't need to thank him, and that if she was mad, she should come catch him. Then he ran while she tried to grab him. The man told him to calm down or they would get caught. Then Blue woke up and asked where he was, and the man was surprised. He saw the map, smiled because it was a sign that Haru was alive. The man gave a slight relieved smile that he had woken up, and says they found him in the middle of that mess. Blue starts to remember that the monster grabbed him but doesn't recall anything after that happened, and he wonders how he survived. But without much time to search for answers, a monster appears before them, with 2 large fangs. The Mohawk guy then gets excited because he was getting bored and charges at the monster. But quickly, the protagonist rushes past him, positions himself in front of the monster, while the man shouts that he had no weapon to face that thing. He positions his fingers, which start to exude energy. The monster moves toward him to attack. He quickly gets into position, and without even touching the monster, attacks it as if it were a shot. Everyone is shocked by that. The monster begins to disintegrate, becoming nothing but a small orb in its core, but that left the boy even more exhausted than he already was. The man holds Blue so he doesn't fall to the ground. Astonished, he asks the boy if he was really human. Meanwhile, back at the subway station, the doctor asks the man if he's managed to get any radio signal, and the man replies that it was a complete failure, because he tried hard to fix it, but didn't expect that all channels were off the air. Now all they could do was wait in case the government or the military made an announcement. The doctor was starting to get worried about the others taking so long. While Haru was sitting in the corner, she hadn't slept since she got back, waiting for Blue. Then the man who was fixing the radio sees that they were already coming back. Haru quickly directs her gaze toward the stairs, and there they were. Blue passed out on the man's back, who called the boy, saying they had arrived. Then, as soon as the boy set his feet on the ground, Haru hugged him with all her strength, whimpering with happiness. Glad that he was alive, even after she had run away, he still managed to stay alive. The others then collapsed to the ground, already exhausted. They were finally safe. The first expedition brought them a week's worth of rations and some medicine. Maybe not the best result, since 2 people were sacrificed, but the past couldn't be changed. Some time passed, and the boy woke up. Haru was by his side. He gave a slight smile, and said he had a dream, and in that dream someone hugged him, and that hug was so warm. Embarrassed, Haru shouted that it was probably just a dream. The boy then noticed the injuries on her legs. She tried to hide them, saying he was worse off than her, and he replied that he was sure he'd be better if he just slept for a few days. She answered that it didn't even make sense because he wasn't a monster, and the boy said he just had a very fast recovery rate. The 2 were happy to be next to each other and safe. Haru then said he was the opposite of her, because she had always run from things, while he always chose to fight, and up to that moment, she wanted to deny and hide the fact that she was a coward. But now she would accept it. She was a coward, but now she would fight like the boy. She knew she couldn't do that right away, but even so, she would try her best in her own way. While she was speaking, she was surprised. The little girl she had abandoned among the monsters in the past. It was as if fate was asking if what she said was true. With a trembling voice, she apologized to the girl for leaving her behind that day, and the little girl extended her hand. Haru asked what that was. The girl replied that it was a hair clip, because she wouldn't be able to see well with her hair in the way without it. Haru asked if it was really okay for her to keep it. Smiling, she replied yes because she had another one, so she didn't need to worry, leaving the girl surprised by the purity of her answers. Then the little girl noticed Haru's forehead, and she quickly replied saying that it was a reminder that she had fought. Blue was surprised because until now he hadn't noticed that. While she asked the little girl if she looked pretty like that, and smiling, she was told yes. Even in the midst of sudden loss and an apparently overwhelming guilt, they found the smallest spark of hope, and took one small step forward at a time. But then also, the boy's thoughts were interrupted by static that came from the radio, and someone on the other side was asking if they could hear them. Everyone was shocked by that. The person on the radio said they'd give them a moment to turn the volume down. The man then shouted, asking if everyone was hearing the radio. Then the person speaking through the radio said he would get straight to the point, and said he had already been prepared, knowing the apocalypse was coming. Blue was in shock. On the radio, the man continued, saying that whether they believed him or not was their decision. He introduced himself, saying his name was List, and that for now he would send a few words of encouragement to the survivors, because it must have been very hard to survive for so long without any help. And he wanted to propose something to those still alive, that they share their locations with each other. If they wanted to survive the monsters, humans should unite. For that, they needed to know each other's locations. He then asked a rhetorical question about how they were supposed to do such a thing, and immediately answered that it would be with light. But of course, he hoped there wouldn't be idiots who would light a campfire and attract the monsters. They should use a flashlight or something similar, since monsters weren't sensitive to artificial light. So they would turn on their flashlights for 10 seconds at midnight. Then Blue's group climbed up to a high place, and at the agreed time turned on their flashlight. What happened surprised them all. Many lights in the city lit up. They were impressed with how many people there were. They weren't the only ones alive after all. At that moment, one of the men told Blue that if that man was telling the truth and knew about the apocalypse, he might have some connection to his father. Another man said he was probably telling the truth because it hadn't even been a month since everything began, and he was certain the guy had modified the radio from military-grade equipment, and considering the power level, it hadn't been built just now. Even for someone skilled, it would have taken at least a month and a half to make. But Blue wasn't even paying attention to what he was saying. He was only thinking that there was no one besides his father who knew about the apocalypse. So in that case, the man on the radio might know about his mother's whereabouts. The radio voice came back, and the man said that his location was the largest light of them all. With all that said, he told them to simply survive. Soon after, the boy got ready and was about to leave in search of answers. But before leaving, the Mohawk man asked if he was really going to go without telling anyone and said he would come along. Blue told him not to follow because he was fine alone. The man didn't care and said he didn't mind. He wanted to go too. Then the protagonist said no, and the memories of his fallen friends invaded his mind. He told the man that if he followed, the same thing as last time could happen again. The guy put his hand on his head and messed up all his hair. That left the boy a little irritated. Then the man told him not to underestimate him, and that those guys went because they wanted tow. They were probably prepared to die from the moment they left, so he shouldn't carry the burden alone, and if he thought that way, he'd be diminishing their sacrifice. He asked the boy why he acted like he'd been through everything in life when he was much younger than him, and said that in moments like this, he could count on him because they were comrades. He thought for a moment and then said that actually, he introduced himself as Hyung, so he could call him by name. The boy turned and said he wouldn't stop even if he followed him, and finished by calling the man Chicken Hair, which made him furious at such a nickname and demand that the boy take it back. Then Haru arrived, saying she was wondering where he had gone, and said she wanted to go too because he would need someone to read the map to reach his destination. She continued, saying she wasn't asking for his permission. She was going with him, and it was no use trying to stop her. Blue simply replied that he wouldn't stop her. Meanwhile, the old man arrived at the spot, asking what was going on, and asked why the man was awake, to which he replied that today was his day on watch. Then something surprised the old man. It was the weapon Blue had forgotten to take. The man said the boy probably wouldn't need it yet. While the old man was visibly disappointed, the man said that boy had always surprised him. When he first saw him, he had easily taken down an adult much larger than him, and had gotten rid of a monster he thought the boy wouldn't be able to kill. From what he had heard recently, the boy had moved in a way no human was capable of. The man asked what he was trying to say. Then he asked who that boy was, and also what he thought he was going to show them next. A little farther away, Hyung was asking if, by making that finger position, he could become as strong as the boy. He tried it, punching a wall, but only hurt his hand and said it didn't make any difference. The boy said he couldn't believe it either, so there wasn't much to say, and that he had to feel his life force. Hyun asked what life force was, and Blue answered that it was the energy inside his body. He kept asking when he had actually managed to feel it. The protagonist said that the moment he clearly felt his life force. Before he could finish speaking, a presence caught his attention. He told the others to wait because there was something there. Haru, afraid, asked if it was a monster and if they shouldn't just run. But that presence wasn't a monster. It was a human. A woman emerged from the ruins of the buildings and said her family was fleeing from the monsters. When she was crushed by the rubble and asked for their help, and said that if he helped her, she would grant him a wish and that he could ask for anything. The Mohawk guy was surprised and asked if it was really anything. A bit embarrassed, the woman said yes. Then he became thoughtful, and soon after exclaimed for them to help her, and Haru asked what he was thinking, about what kind of wish he was going to ask for. Blue asked if they were the only ones who could help her, and the woman confirmed. He stayed quiet and thoughtful, because he knew the woman wasn't telling the truth. Some men were hiding, and Blue asked if there really were only them to help her, since there were so many people around them. The woman quickly changed her tone and said he was quick to understand things. While the men approached, she went on saying she would take them to her base to take care of them. But now things had gotten a bit complicated. Young was outraged that he wouldn't get his wish since there were so many people to help her. While he complained, Haru cursed at him since they didn't have time for that. One of the woman's thugs came over, mocking him. The woman then told them to hand everything over to her, including their clothes. That left the girl shocked, and she asked if she thought they would agree to that. And when she looked at the other two, they were already taking off their things. She then shouted, asking what they were doing, why they were obeying her orders. With a malicious look, the woman said she should take hers off too unless she wanted to die. The girl was in shock, while the woman's thugs moved toward her. The man who had mocked Hinong asked him to hand over his clothes and bag. He then threw his clothes on the ground, leaving the man confused. When he bent down to pick them up, the Mohawk guy kicked him in the face, and quickly started stripping the man's clothes off him. Put them on and asked Blue if the clothes looked good on him. The woman became furious and shouted for her thugs to kill them. With a knife, a man charged at Blue, but with extreme ease, the boy dodged, punched the man in the middle of the chest, and swiftly punched the knife, pinning the man to the wall. That immense skill frightened the woman. Meanwhile, Hyung was having fun beating up the men. Outraged, the woman screamed, asking what they were doing and why they were losing to just two people, and told them to finish off the girl first. Several quickly rushed at Haru, with knives and sticks. But with her agility, she managed to dodge easily. She joined the other two while the woman kept wondering what world they were from. Then they were interrupted by shouts saying there were monsters coming and telling everyone to hide. The woman told her thugs to run from there. Meanwhile, someone was watching the commotion through binoculars, and especially the three youths, from a house on the highest hill, which once had the brightest light, just watching everything that was happening. Blue and his friends reached a place, and he said they would stay there for a while. Haru said that place was a total dump and looked completely looted, and that there was probably no one there, because when everyone turned on their lights, there was no one there. The young man was noticing something was wrong, because all those things, they seemed to be artificial. Someone had intentionally hidden their tracks, so there was someone there. Before he could even warn everyone to stop where they were, the two of them were caught in a trap. Haru quickly tried to hide since she was wearing a skirt, and they told everyone not to look that way. Hyung asked what was going on. Then a man appeared, dropping down from the upper part of the ceiling, landing between the two of them. He said he had been wondering who they were, and asked if they were the idiots who had escaped earlier. The tension in the air was thick. He got close to the girl and told Blue not to approach, or else she'd be sent to an early grave. That already left the girl desperate, and he also said he'd end her life if Blue lied to him. He asked why they were there. The boy then replied that they were on their way to find the source of the radio transmission. He immediately questioned why the man hadn't just signaled with a flashlight from there, to which the man scoffed at the boy and asked if he really believed the guy on the radio. He called him naive, asking how he didn't know it might be a raider, revealing his location was no different from asking to be robbed. And more importantly, the man on the radio had predicted the apocalypse. If it were a more plausible lie, he could at least try to believe it. Blue then said it was true. The man asked what was true. Blue said he would know because he had also been preparing for it. There was a real possibility the man was telling the truth. The man fell silent, then said he had warned him that he would end the girl's life if he lied, while playing with the girl's hair. In the blink of an eye, Blue charged at him. When he thought he had landed the hit, the man dodged the boy's strike, which left him surprised. The man quickly attacked the protagonist, but fortunately he managed to block the strike. Even so, the man immediately landed a kick on the boy, sending him back several meters, still on his feet. But his opponent didn't stop and kept throwing blows at him. He kept dodging until his back hit the wall. The man went in for another attack, and Blue, trying to get out of there, struck at him. Yet the man easily dodged again. That surprised the boy. His opponent turned to him and said the boy was a bit different from the other raiders. Blue replied that they weren't raiders. There was something strange about that guy's movements. His attacks weren't fast at all, but he moved as if he had already anticipated all of Blue's moves. In that case, the boy just needed to attack fast enough that the man couldn't react at all. And that's exactly what he did, throwing punches and more punches with all his strength, kicks and more kicks, each faster than the last, until the man was completely cornered, with Blue getting closer and closer. It was as if he could see multiple possibilities of attacks the protagonist was about to make, and just as the punch came in, at the last second he would dodge and quickly counterattack. While the intense battle was going on inside, a monster was walking casually down the street, ready at any moment to hear or see the two of them inside. They noticed the monster outside, but not even that was enough to make the fight stop. That guy was determined to see it through, and Blue knew that if he made too much noise, the monster would catch him, but he couldn't approach his opponent with smaller movements. As the man came toward him, he wondered if he could pull it off again, but he knew he had to try no matter what. The man was surprised when he backed off. Blue then took his stance to reach the peak of his power. The man didn't understand what he was doing. At that moment, the protagonist was letting his life force flow through his body, all the way to the tips of his fingers. Then, like a blur, he rushed at the man, who didn't even realize what had happened. In the blink of an eye, the boy was already behind him, holding the weapon that had been his. When the man noticed the boy's presence, Blue was already telling him to keep quiet. The weapon he'd taken from his opponent aimed at him. With that, Blue freed his friends, who were complaining about pain and dizziness from being hung up. The man who had tied them up was now tied himself, sitting on the floor, and asked what they were going to do with him now, whether they were capable of ending his career. The two of them looked at each other as if they'd had the same idea. Smiling, they went at the man, tying him up in the same place they had been tied, and spinning him around wildly to get their revenge. They threw him to the ground again, and the man asked what they wanted from him. Blue replied that he didn't want anything and had been telling him that for a while now. That left the man completely confused. He said they were just trying to find out where the radio transmission was coming from and also take the opportunity to get some supplies and medicine. The man didn't believe the boy's words, but Blue continued, saying they would stay there to rest for a bit and then continue their journey, and that he wouldn't untie the man so what happened earlier wouldn't happen again. The man asked how the boy had done that earlier because, for a moment, he couldn't even see his movements. Then, as the boy was about to answer, he noticed something and asked what was above them. The other two didn't understand. The man's expression changed. Up above, there was a monster. A monster wrapped around a child. The two were shocked by that monster living so calmly there. The man said it was fine, that they wouldn't be attacked, and that monster was his sister. That left them stunned by such information. Blue could feel the little girl's life force still existed. She was slightly alive. Haru asked how that child was still alive. The man said he understood her. With those injuries, she should already be dead. But according to his theory, that monster was prolonging her life and surviving by feeding on his sister's body. Haru said you couldn't really say she was alive at that moment, and instead of what he said, she seemed miserable. Hyung asked why he was letting that happen if he could just remove it. He replied that he had already tried, but it was so rooted in her body that it was impossible. With no shame or feeling, he then said the man should just kill that thing. For a moment, the room fell silent. The man let out a mocking laugh at him, thinking it was possible to kill that monster. He asked if he knew how to do such a thing. Then the Mohawk guy said that all monsters had a core, and you just had to aim for it and destroy it. Blue confirmed his friend's idea. The man laughed when he heard about the core, and said they had to be joking with him, that he had tried everything, and they had no idea how far he had gone, and that monster didn't have the core the boys were talking about. Hyung couldn't believe what he was saying, but Blue, upon inspecting the monster's body, confirmed that the monster didn't have a core in its body. The man told them to leave. Haru, irritated, asked if the man wanted to be spun around again. Something then cut the ropes binding the man's hands. Blue cut them with just one strike and called his friends to leave, and they set off after the guy who was on the radio. The man stayed there, watching them from the window. Isolated in his attic, alone with his little sister, he began telling her what had happened. Some idiots had shown up, and one guy said he was preparing for the apocalypse, and another said there was a way to kill that monster. Laughing, he said it wasn't even that funny. He asked the girl if she had heard all that, but there was no answer. He stayed there, head lowered, trying to be strong with what was happening. He looked to the side and saw his sister's teddy bear. He walked over to pick it up, with it in his hands, staring at the stuffed animal. He heard noises coming from downstairs. It was the sound of his trap. Turning around to ask if the boys had come back, he saw a huge monster entering the attic. Its body had a very bizarre shape. Thinking of protecting his little sister, he grabbed his weapon and stood in front of the monster to fight it. He activated his visual ability. He could see the monster's shadows in front of him, but his vision began to blur and strawberry juice dripped from his nose. He had used his head too much earlier to fight Blue. The monster didn't even try hard and was already able to grab the man by the arms. It seemed to be draining his life force. He grew weaker and weaker, almost fainting. When his head dropped, he saw the teddy bear lying on the ground, the one he had wanted to give to his little sister. He then began to remember what had happened before the apocalypse. Returning home after buying the bear for his sister, talking to her on the phone as she asked what time he would arrive, and he replied he wouldn't be late. And the little girl? Anxious, asked, "What were the chances?" Confidently, he replied they were 0. That boy had something the others didn't have, the ability to see how many possibilities could come, and with that he played chess, beating every opponent he faced, without even showing a single trace of happiness, because he was already used to it. He could predict his victory many moves before anyone else. Meanwhile, the little girl was watching her brother on TV, telling him over the phone to hurry up because the interview was about to start, and he had promised they would watch it together. For the boy, it wasn't anything impressive. He just had to combine all the factors he noticed and put them into a simulation inside his mind. The temperature of the air, what he could see in front of him, and the sounds around him. Even someone with no control over a vehicle, he could still predict what was going to happen next. As if it were the easiest thing in the world. However, if he repeated this too often, it would end with a severe headache. On the other side of the phone, the little girl desperately asked what that noise was, and he told her not to worry. Curious, she asked what he was buying at the last minute. It was his little sister's birthday. When he was about to answer her question, holding the teddy bear, the call turned into loud static and was cut off, leaving the young man confused. But the skies began to darken rapidly. All the birds became startled and flew away quickly. Everyone stopped what they were doing, looking up at the sky with panic written on their faces. That massive black sphere dominated above, and those monsters were descending rapidly to the surface. That was the first time he saw something he could never predict. He wondered what those mysterious creatures were. Everyone trying to use their phones, him searching for some answer on the internet. But the internet no longer worked, no signal to clear his doubts, and that massive number of monsters invading his planet. The shockwave passed. When he lifted his head and opened his eyes, he saw a world no one had expected to see. The monsters attacking people in the most brutal ways possible. Looking at the teddy bear in his hand, he could only think of his little sister. He kept walking toward his house, wondering what the goal of those monsters was. It wasn't just killing humans, because they weren't the only ones being attacked. So what was the real objective? He questioned it frantically. Was it to kill all living beings or just a means to an end? In the middle of his thoughts, a monster stopped in front of him, attacking, but the young man dodged and kept going, thinking that if he advanced 50 more meters, he could confirm his sister was safe. But before finishing that thought, he saw something flying and hitting where his sister was. Once again, something happened without him being able to predict it. He rushed into the house, basing it on the air temperature, what he could see in front of him, the sounds around him. Based on those factors, he could predict what had happened there. Upon reaching the attic, he could then see with his own eyes. His little sister had been attacked by the monster, but he didn't seem surprised as it was already something he had foreseen. And seeing that monster practically merge with his sister, he grabbed a bladed weapon. With all the rage in his body, he attacked, leaving everything around stained with strawberry juice. But even after several blows, it didn't come off the little girl, and, incredibly, he didn't know what else to do. Then the day ended, and the next day, suddenly, all traces of the mysterious planet it came from disappeared. The monsters kept roaming the surface, so he fortified his house first so he wouldn't get caught. If there was anything unusual about the situation, it was that his sister's heart was still beating, and she should have died from that type of injury. But it seemed that monster was clinging to her life like a parasite. Now all he could do was watch his little sister suffer, unable to do anything to help, because he had already tried to remove that thing from her, but ended up failing. He had only tested one single method, one single possibility. He had to remove that thing from his sister's body. Its regenerative ability was the greatest obstacle preventing him from killing it. The monsters were all the same in that sense. They had regenerative abilities, but the speed at which they healed varied. So what would be their limit, and how did they obtain the energy necessary to regenerate? He wondered. How would he manage to achieve his goal and free his sister from suffering?
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.